good evening. It's Romania Black, or good day, or whatever time zone y'all are in. We're on volume 3 of Scum Villain, Scum Villain Self-Saving System. And last week we got a pretty good discussion out of only 2 chapters. So how about for the next several weeks we do 3 chapters? Because that's literally what I think the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks are going to be 3 chapter sets. So hope you're ready. So I am. We're looking at chapters 57 through 59 today for Scum Villain Self-Saving System. And last week I went in a totally different direction than I thought I was going to go, surprising no one. It's MXTX. But we have a lot going on. And now Shen QingQiu is back in his original body. So the sun, moon, dew mushroom did its job. It's withered away. It literally collapsed in front of Luo Binghe. So I can't imagine how he feels. But yeah, we're going to get to that. And now Shen QingQiu is essentially in a mausoleum, the Holy Mausoleum, with potentially Zhu Xilong. Potentially Zhu Xilong only. But also, who knows? We just spent the last week talking about Luo Binghe's dad. Maybe he's here too. We don't know. So I didn't have any comments that pertained to the last chapter set that were noteworthy. I'm reading several weeks ahead, if you didn't already guess, because I'm too addicted to this story to stop. And so I did have a couple things that I did notice as I was editing. I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about that. But real quick, Be Happy pointed this out. Be Happy, who is the moderator for this series and is doing a great job of doing such and keeping me not spoiled, noted how Luo Binghe has just been, he's been, near the corpse of Shen QingQiu and basically repairing his meridians this entire time. So maybe, possibly, with that in mind, is it possible that maybe the without a cure poison thing was solved since his meridians were fixed? I guess we'll find out in maybe this chapter set. But I also noted, I didn't mention this during the discussion last week because there was so much going on, but I thought it was interesting how the back and forth between Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe, whenever they're switching positions, trying to figure out who's the dominant one and who's not. I was like, are you guys going to be like verse or something? I mean, maybe Shen QingQiu's a side. I don't know. Maybe Shen QingQiu could be a side. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, but we'll just have to see, won't we? The big thing, though, not just Luo Binghe's heavenly pillar, but the big thing I wanted to make note that I forgot to mention in last week's discussion that hit me as I was editing, not unlike Luo Binghe's heavenly pillar, but I'm getting my mind out of the gutter. MXTX gutter mind is already activated. This is not a good sign. But I forgot to mention that now that Shen QingQiu is back in his original body, that means he probably has in his inventory the jade talisman and the binding rope, because he lost both of those things when he self-detonated. And at the time, I was like, oh, well, they probably fell off of his person, or they're no longer able to be used because he's in a new body. But one, this is a novel and it's the self-saving system, so it's probably like activating an inventory in a video game where you pull out the item and it's like Legend of Zelda. It's like dee, and then you can use the bow and doing that. So it's probably like one of those where he's going to be like saving myself, like one of those moments. So I think that those items are going to be used later at some point. We'll see. I think that MXTX wanted us to forget about those items because that's how she is. She wants you to forget about things, and then they've been there in plain sight the whole time, but there's all this other shit going on. It's like that video where you watch and there's like a bear moving across the screen, but you're too busy looking at all these other things, you miss the bear. That's how MXTX works. She's like one of those little mind games. That's how she does it. And you're just like, oh, that's been here the whole time. And that's how she works. So I'm like, MXTX, you are a genius and a mastermind, and I am groveling at your feet. So what can we do? She's a queen for sure. One thing I do want to make note of, I don't have anything really from the feral fandom to make note of, except y'all got this obsession with 6 balls. We just got to the point in the videos airing on Patreon where 6 balls is the demon that shows up to help Shen QingQiu that he recruits, and everybody was like, 6 balls is the best. 6 balls is the most balls that one demon can have, and I'm like, I can't with you all. Although someone did share a fan art of 6 balls, it was the cutest thing I've seen in a long time, and I was like, okay, I get the 6 balls hype now. Maybe 6 balls will make an appearance later on. Maybe he'll become the second main character. Who knows? Maybe he'll take Shen QingQiu's place. Who knows? So here's the thing. You can think you know where the story is going, and MXTX is like, nah, bitch, you ain't got a clue. And it's like, okay, cool. There is a storm brewing outside. I checked my radar, and there is a thunderstorm watch out, but you know what? It's also, we're going to read this and go on. I feel like a storm rumbling into the area as we're reading about Shen QingQiu possibly coming into contact with Zhu Xilong and maybe Luo Binghe's dad. Seems like it could be a recipe for some craziness, but we're not going to waste any more time, y'all. We are going to dive right in and see what we get. My dogs are at my feet because they know it's storming, and what can we do? But we're going to look at chapters 57 through 59 of Scum Villain Self-Saving System, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Shen QingQiu looked up. It was as if 2 yellow lanterns were lit outside the hall, a pair of huge golden eyes like bronze bells looking this way. Within each eye was a long, slitted pupil, lending them a malevolent air. When those blind corpses heard that hiss, it was like they had suffered an incorporeal shock. They stopped in their savage pursuit and hunched their shoulders, heads lowered, huddling in shivering mass. Those lamp-like eyes held Shen QingQiu's gaze for a while before they suddenly disappeared. A moment later, a figure strolled in from outside the hall. Shen QingQiu wasn't surprised when he made out the newcomer's form. Zhu Xilong. Zhu Xilong's feet nearly slipped out from under him. He rubbed his nose. Though he felt a bit glum, he didn't misplace his manners. If immortal Master Shen wishes to call me as such, he may do as he pleases, he said with a smile. Oh, so he's giving him a nickname. So, you really were the one who stole my corpse from Jiangding Hall, said Shen QingQiu. The poison that had left those disciples black and blue all over was likely a jade serpent's venom. There we go. The fact that Mu Qingfang had been unable to find injuries during his quick inspection was because the snake's teeth were fine and small, its bites difficult to discern. Those are the scariest type of snakes, because when you don't know that the bites are even there, that's terrifying. With a more thorough examination, you would find the imprints of teeth in hidden places like fingertips and heels, or possibly on sexual organs, but who knows? We can't assume so much. Everything happened so suddenly, and I can only resort to that inferior plan, said Zhu Xilong. I hope immortal Master Shen will forgive me. Shen QingQiu gave a dry cough. The everything that happened so suddenly could only be referring to that time he used an entire town's supply of real gar wine to smoke out Zhu Xilong. Shen QingQiu had even forced him back to his original form and ridden him quite a ways. MXTX! Saying that he rid him quite a ways? Could we have found a better way to word that? A less sexual way to word that? Anyway, MXTX got her mind. You're summoning me to the Holy Mausoleum, he said. Did resolve a certain troublesome situation I'd fallen into. Oh, that must have been a typo. Earlier, you invited me to the demon realm. Now that I'm here, can you tell me exactly what your goal is? I've already explained the first reason to immortal Master Shen, said Zhu Xilong. A drop of kindness should be repaid with a torrent. As for the second, I was not the one who summoned immortal Master Shen. It may be best if you ask my lord directly. Very well. Where is Tianlong Jun? Asked Shen QingQiu. Zhu Xilong started. I thought immortal Master Shen and my lord had already greeted each other. Greeted each other? Shen QingQiu looked down at the stone coffin. Was the reanimated corpse in there Tianlong Jun? Strictly speaking, they hadn't greeted each other, all right? The coffin that had been unable to pry open no matter his efforts began to shake unceasingly and slowly slid open its lid. Oh no! A person slowly sat up from inside. The person propped an elbow on the rim of the coffin. Oh my God! And tilted his head with a faint smile. Shizun Peak Lord, it's an honor to meet you at last. Shen QingQiu was stunned. Though this family's interests and hobbies spanned a wide range, they managed some coincidental similarities anyway, having the same unique style. The son liked to hold corpses, while the dad liked to lie around in coffins. Oh my God! In appearance, Luo Binghe resembled his mother, Shizun, but you could more or less see the shadow of his father in him. For example, in the eyes. Tianlongjun's eyes were deep set, his brow strong and heroic, the irises dark like a fathomless water. In this, he and Luo Binghe were very much alike. Luo Binghe had a pretty boy appearance in the first place, but if his eyes resembled his mother's too, his face would have been excessively feminine and the effect would be lost. For another example, the smile. Both the father and son's smiles gave Shen QingQiu an indescribable kind of ominous premonition. No, this is not good. This is not good. Shen QingQiu, you need to get out of there right now. I have not been the Peak Lord for many years, Shen QingQiu cautiously replied. And yet I've long awaited our meeting, Peak Lord Shen. Tianlongjun said, all smiles. Shen QingQiu felt it down to his bones. That one's force of personality could indeed only be determined by family background and upbringing. Putting aside everything else, if you sat both father and son in the same coffin in the same pose, Tianlongjun's kingly grace could make said coffin look like an emperor's throne. Luo Binghe, however, though he was handsome, would probably still look like he was just sitting in a coffin. No wonder airplanes shooting towards the sky had felt threatened and given Tianlongjun's plotline a decisive axe. Oh my God, he wouldn't have known what to do with them. Oh my God. Being in the same space as the two heirs of the heavenly demon bloodline, with the many dried or not so dried mummies of demon nobles as onlookers, Shen QingQiu was under a lot of pressure. I wouldn't presume, he said with a smile that wouldn't reach his eyes, since your distinguished self has longed to meet me for such a while, why don't you come out to do so? No matter how much Tianlongjun might want to show off, hanging out in a coffin was a little too much. Unless Tianlongjun couldn't stand. Tianlongjun's hand tapped a slow rhythm on the coffin rim. His dark irises reflected the dim green flames leaping about the tomb as he spoke in a delighted tone. Well, of course. Would the Peak Lord assist me? Even if this was a trick, Shen QingQiu could only forge on. He leaned forward a bit and stretched out a hand. As you wish. Tianlongjun cheerfully took that hand and stood. So he wasn't concealing any weaknesses after all. Shen QingQiu was a bit disappointed. Then the weight pulling on his arm disappeared. However, he was still clearly holding Tianlongjun's forearm. Shen QingQiu shifted his gaze downward. He was indeed still holding it, but the forearm was the only thing he was holding. Shen QingQiu's face was blank. Tianlongjun had lost an arm, and one of his sleeves was empty, but he remained polite. Ah, it came off again. Would the Peak Lord please hand that to me? Shen QingQiu said nothing. His hand didn't conduct the trembling of his spirit, and he calmly returned the severed arm to Tianlongjun. He and Zhu Xilong both wore expressions that suggested this was all normal, and with a click, really a click, Tianlongjun snapped the arm back in place. Snapped it back in place! Are you a fucking doll? Your joints can be attached and detached just like that? Shen QingQiu noticed that the flesh at the severed end, as well as in many other patches upon that arm, had turned a violet black, looking especially frightful against Tianlongjun's pale skin. There were even faint dark patches creeping out from beneath his collar. Shen QingQiu struggled with himself for a while. With a flutter of a butterfly's wing, he had raised more than a mere tidal wave. His initial guess that Zhu Xilong had used the dew mushroom to create a new body for Tianlongjun had turned out completely correct. However, it seemed that this dew mushroom body could not provide Tianlongjun with a satisfactory experience. The reason Shen QingQiu's soul had meshed well with the dew mushroom was twofold. First, the dew mushroom had grown using his blood and qi, and second, the dew mushroom was a product of spiritual qi, and Shen QingQiu and also cultivated with a base of spiritual qi. In essence, the two were entirely compatible. However, Tian Longjun's situation differed. He was a demon, and he cultivated with a base of demonic qi. The dew mushroom naturally reacted by rejecting him. And as expected, it seemed there was no freshness guarantee on his new body. So a situation wherein the body had already begun to deteriorate was entirely possible. Oh my god, so he's just a corpse that's just slowly falling apart as we go. Oh! Tian Longjun rotated the reattached limb and smiled. My apologies. Come to think of it, Peak Lord Shin shares some of the credit in enabling us to leave Bailu Mountain. Shen QingQiu looked at Zhu Xilong, who stood silently off to the side. The snake man form he had possessed back in Bailu Forest had truly been a spectacle too awful to behold. Even so, in all the years Tian Longjun had been sealed under Bailu Mountain, Zhu Xilong had never left its vicinity. And upon obtaining the dew mushroom, he hadn't used it for himself, but created a new body for his master without the slightest hesitation. What a paragon of loyalty! Shen QingQiu scanned the tomb's murals out of the corner of his eye, and he half-heartedly kept up the conversation. The credit belongs to Zhu Xilong. He said low around Bailu Mountain for years until his chance finally came. With such a capable subordinate, Tian Longjun is someone to be admired. Have you heard my nephew's motto? Said Tian Longjun. I have. A drop of kindness must be repaid by a torrent. Is that it? Zhu Xilong's face went red, turning an eerie color under the green candlelight. My lord, immortal Master Shen, please do not mock me. Shen QingQiu had no such intentions. He was, at present, turning the bulk of his focus towards the murals. These murals were brightly colored, their brushstrokes wild, and he could tell that the one directly across from the door was a giant woman's face. Her eyes were curved, and the corners of her lips upturned, the expression of someone overtaken by joy. Without a doubt, of the three holy tombs of delight, fury, and sorrow, this was the Hall of Delight. Tian Longjun hadn't noticed anything strange. He's always been like this, somewhat hard-headed and inflexible. So he kept entreating me to bring you here to the demon realm. Shen QingQiu still didn't understand this logic. Collecting his thoughts, he gave Zhu Xilong a look. Does bringing me to the demon realm have anything to do with repaying a favor? Of course it does, said Tian Longjun with ease, because none of the four major sects will be allowed to survive. If Peak Lord Shen were still at Sangzhong Mountain sect now, you would be included with them. So obviously, he didn't want you to stay there. Shen QingQiu didn't know how to continue this conversation. Just before, he thought this fellow was a reasonable sort, but after conversing, he discovered that Tian Longjun was no different from all the final boss villains who set their heart on the ambitious life goal of destroying the world and massacring all the heroes. But come to think of it, if a nice young man of noble lineage was sealed under a mountain by a bunch of strange cultivators for many years, it wasn't surprising that he would turn out resentful. Shen QingQiu went silent for a moment. Then he tried to give a cooperative response. Is the next step exterminating the entire human race? Why would you think so? Said Tian Longjun, confused. Of course not. I like humans, I just don't like the four major sects. He smiled and added, on the contrary, I have a gift for the human realm. Though Shen QingQiu didn't know what sort of gift this was, it definitely wasn't something you could put a ribbon on and expect to make people happy. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the discussion, but it also is interesting to me that you have Shen QingQiu talking about how strange it would be if you were sealed under a mountain for years and you'd be resentful, but that's also kind of tying back to Luo Binghe being kept in the abyss and why he's resentful now, and Shen QingQiu doesn't exactly put two and two together there. Just saying, we'll come back to it. A roast was just about to leave Shen QingQiu's mouth, somewhat rusty though he was, when suddenly a tremor spread through the whole tomb hall. Sand and pebbles tumbled loose from the ceiling. Well, what's this gift for humanity? What are we talking about? Oh, even though Shen QingQiu was standing firmly, he still swayed back and forth, and he even heard the faint and distant sounds of some creature's earth-shaking roar. Alarmed, he said, well, what is that? Tian Longjun listened closely for a moment. This is even faster than I anticipated. He turned to Zhu Xilong. How many? As my dogs are going crazy. At least 200, Zhu Xilong said. Tian Longjun laughed. Capturing even 10 would be impressive enough. He's gone to some trouble. Shen QingQiu didn't understand this exchange, and it didn't look like they were going to loop him in either. So is this... It said he's gone to some trouble, so I'm assuming they're talking about Luo Binghe, because who else would they talk about? They wouldn't talk about any of the sects as one person, right? Tan Longjung swept a smattering of dust and sand from his shoulders. Peak Lord Shen, for 5 years, my nephew has been putting his all into helping you make a clean break from Sangzhong Mountain sect. What do you think? Will you go with him? This abduction is already done, and I'm here in this tomb, so why the hell are you asking this now? Shen QingQiu paused. Wait, 5 years ago, a clean break? Shen QingQiu's heart thumped. He blurted out, the sower in Jinlan City was meant to be a catalyst for a clean break with my sect? No matter how you thought about it, the reasons he could never return to his sect all stemmed from the events in Jinlan City. You ordered that sower to single me out? Xu Shilong lowered his head. Tian Longjun patted his nephew's shoulder as if in encouragement. That was originally a little experiment to relieve the famine for the southern border demons. But Peak Lord Shen also happened to be present. Xu Shilong merely wanted to completely remove Peak Lord Shen's desire to remain in the human realm. Oh my god! He was trying to frame Shen QingQiu and make him run away from everyone else so that he could go stay with them. They're all into Shen QingQiu! Oh no! Shen QingQiu immediately turned a furious glare to Xu Shilong. This is what you call reciprocating in kind? Getting a sower to slander me? The hell! Of course a snake's way of repaying a favor would be utterly ridiculous. Immortal Master Shen, Xu Shilong said quietly. Since my lord has said he will eliminate the 4 major sects, he definitely won't leave a single survivor. This humble one truly hopes that at the same time... Shen QingQiu shoved down his anger. Did you bring Chu Taitang too? I don't know this name. Said Tian Longjun. It's like, I don't know her. He looked at Xu Shilong, and the latter immediately turned to Shen QingQiu to clarify. This humble one did not bring that woman. So had the pincer attack between the sower's accusations and Chu Haitang's sudden appearance, which had forced Shen QingQiu to surrender to imprisonment in Huanhua Palace's water prison, really only been coincidence? Oh, whatever. Now, the things that come to this, it probably didn't matter. Well, don't say that, because they probably do matter. Shen QingQiu. What about the other reasons? I indeed had some of my own reasons to summon Peak Lord Shen here, Tian Longjun replied. He continued slowly. I must thank Peak Lord Shen for taking exceptional care of that son of mine all these years. Then, Shen QingQiu had already suspected that Luo Binghe was involved. His heart still clenched. He forcibly collected his thoughts and asked, Luo Binghe, what does this have to do with him? Tian Longjun let out a chuckle and looked down. Oh, how should I start? I discovered that for Peak Lord Shen, the feelings he nurses are especially... He spoke vaguely and didn't even answer the question, but it wasn't difficult for Shen QingQiu to string together an extensive chain of connections. The longer Tian Longjun used this body, the stronger his demonic energy became. In turn, the more his cultivation recovered, the more tattered his body became, filling it with those dark patches. Sooner or later, he would need a new body. This body would ideally belong to one of his demon blood relations, a fellow heir of the heavenly demon bloodline. If it continued 2 separate cultivation systems due to mixed parentage, so much the better. Who could be more suitable than Luo Binghe? Shen QingQiu squinted. You summoned my soul to draw him to the Holy Mausoleum? Peak Lord Shen understands, Tian Longjun said. Luo Binghe is yet to assume the seat you once had, Shen QingQiu reminded him. He can't enter the mausoleum. Even if he wanted, he couldn't. However, Tian Longjun seemed to have great faith in Luo Binghe. As long as he wants to enter, he definitely can. Does he know? Does he know the secrets? Also, what the fudge? Shen QingQiu said slowly, well, no matter what you do, he's still your son. Indeed. Your child by Su Jian. So? Now, Shen QingQiu was sure. In the few words Tian Longjun had said about Luo Binghe, though his faint smile had not disappeared, an apathetic detachment had been evident in his words and expression. This Tian Longjun was far different from the deeply passionate and pacifistic character that Shen QingQiu had originally envisioned. When he mentioned Su Jian, his voice didn't even tremble. He liked to call Luo Binghe that son of mine, but he didn't seem to possess any concept of fatherly affection. Not only was he not a pacifist, but he wasn't even someone who believed that love prevailed over all. He had completely toppled Shen QingQiu's long-held, one-sided preconceptions. In truth, this was quite normal. Demons were cold and unfeeling when it came to relationships. They were more inclined to the pleasures of good food and the admiration of strength and power, but shouldn't have amounted to such an utterly uncaring attitude. Shen QingQiu was a bit uncomfortable. Interesting, that note about relationships when you have Luo Binghe, who's kind of countering that. Luo Binghe was, in fact, someone who was unloved by even his own parents. Oh no! So Shen QingQiu's like, well, shit, that sucks. Shen QingQiu had always placed the black pot of blame for Jinlan City on Luo Binghe's head. It seemed that the child had been wronged all this time, and he'd attempted to explain himself again and again to no avail. When they had parted not too long ago, Shen QingQiu had even viciously gouged at him with his words. He was rather dissatisfied with Tianlongjun, but if he had thought about it honestly, he hadn't done much better himself. He had hurt Luo Binghe even deeper than his father had. This was the critical failure. The tomb hall fell into a deathly silence. Only when a second round of tremors descended, accompanied by roars of hundreds of beasts, did the stalemate break. The quakes this time were even fiercer, the force nearly strong enough to collapse everything around them. So I'm not saying that Luo Binghe should be like, oh, everything he did was totally justified, but I am glad that Shen QingQiu is like, ooh, I was kind of being a dick last week, and I probably shouldn't have done that. Well, now look, this is their third chance. Start over. Shen QingQiu wasn't able to stay upright no matter how steady his footing, and he put one hand on the coffin. Can someone tell exactly what this, before he could finish the word, is? The gemstone-studded ceiling overhead suddenly collapsed, coming down in chunks. All three people inside the tomb reacted quickly and dodged far away. With a deafening thud, something heavy crashed down and landed in the center of the tomb hall. Amidst thick roiling dust and the haphazard glint of gems, an enormous black shadow appeared. A heavenly pillar, if you will. Luo Binghe stood atop a pitch-black giant beast, sable robes fluttering amidst the pale dust. Jinmo was partially unsheathed behind him, cutting an imposing figure, and his two eyes overflowing with crimson light gazed down, full of murderous intent. Yay, we have 2 more chapters! 2 more chapters! Holy shit! Okay. At first glance, the great beast appeared to be some sort of rhinoceros with a single horn arching from his forehead. Nothing phallic at all as it curved like a crescent moon. But when it opened its mouth and let out a cry, a giant scarlet python uncurled from its blood-red maw. Oh! The rhinoceros's bellow mixed with the python's hissing shriek made for a particularly stunning impression. In the flesh, a black moon rhinoceros python. Now we're connecting the story back together. Black plus moon plus rhinoceros plus python. So the black moon rhinoceros python really was a simple combination of these 4 elements. Great Master! Airplane shooting towards the sky's naming sense was as dependable as always. Zhu Xilong dutifully moved to stand in front of Tianlongjun in the process of also getting in front of Shen QingQiu. Furthermore, as soon as Shen QingQiu saw Luo Binghe, he subconsciously scooted closer to Zhu Xilong's back. It wasn't like he was desperate to avoid Luo Binghe, but he had a guilty conscience and didn't have the face to look at him. He dared even less to consider what Luo Binghe might have been feeling, having seen Shen QingQiu breathe his last before his eyes a second time. He could only unconsciously avoid the issue by not allowing himself to look, pretending he didn't see, but he wouldn't be bothered. Tianlongjun raised an eyebrow. This expression, too, bore a remarkable resemblance to something Luo Binghe might wear. So he didn't hesitate to capture 200 black moon rhinoceros pythons to break the barrier around the Holy Mausoleum. Peak Lord Shen, this son of mine, truly goes to extraordinary lengths for you. Shen QingQiu had no retort. This was a rare demonic beast at that. In the original work, summoned even the endless abyss with its call. Luo Binghe had gone as far to capture 200 at once in order to break into the Holy Mausoleum. Only after the dust settled could Shen QingQiu clearly see that Luo Binghe had indeed broken into the Holy Mausoleum all by himself. To the demon race, the Holy Mausoleum was both sacred ground and a restricted area. Either one merited reverence from the local demons, so they wouldn't dare commit any violations. This was a question of faith, so no one dared to come with Luo Binghe. Of course he could only do it alone. Your courage is commendable, said Tianlongjun. However, while your coming here is of no great consequence, you shouldn't have brought those 2 strays. Luo Binghe leapt down from the rhinoceros python's head, a dark expression on his face, as if that great beast had exhausted the last of its energy and could continue no longer. It collapsed to the ground with a crash. Luo Binghe fixed an unwavering glare on Shen QingQiu, sparks flying from his eyes. He looked furious, yet also as if he was about to cry. Shen QingQiu suddenly realized that when he ducked behind Zhu Xilong a moment ago, it had looked too much like he was avoiding Luo Binghe again. But he didn't have time to explain right now. The person standing beside him was the male lead's dad, the one who even the author had confirmed had a crushing power advantage over the protagonist in all respects. Shen QingQiu finally got a sound out of his throat. Go back! Luo Binghe didn't respond. With a flick of his hand, he tossed Zhuya over. And only after seeing Shen QingQiu catch the sword did he turn to face the other two people in the mausoleum hall. After gathering two fiery rolling masses of demonic energy in his palms, Luo Binghe his figure flickered, and he flung straight forward. Fighting already! Luo Binghe's left hand smashed into Zhu Xilong's abdomen, sending him flying without a moment of suspense. His right hand bore down on Tianlongjun. Shen QingQiu went tense, focusing all his attention on the scene. Yet Tianlongjun caught the blow. Without retreating even a single step, he flipped his hand and lightly swept it downward, brushing his palm across Luo Binghe's shoulder. Shen QingQiu swore he could hear the bones breaking within Luo Binghe's body, and as if in confirmation, Luo Binghe blinked and then without warning coughed up a mouthful of blood. The entirety of his chin, chest, and neck were stained red, and the blood continued to drip down to the ground. Luo Binghe wiped the corner of his mouth, looking a bit confused. To tell the truth, it had been a long time since he had been injured to the point of spitting blood. Well, wasn't it laid down in the law that the protagonist has OP plot armor? Have we switched to screwing over the protagonist now that we're done screwing with the reader? Tianlongjun had given Luo Binghe only a light tap on the shoulder, but that arm of his came off again. Tianlongjun furrowed his brow, and Zhu Xilong immediately scooped up the arm and presented it with both hands. Luo Binghe stopped wiping at the blood and reached behind to grab Zhenmo from its place on his back, a dangerous glint flashing through his eyes. That sword is a good blade, remarked Tianlongjun. It's just a pity that your technique is a hideous mess. Come with me, Luo Binghe called to Shen QingQiu. Oh, we're doing this again. Don't turn him down this time. He's asked you before. It's too late, said Zhu Xilong. 200 rhinoceros pythons were sufficient to open the Holy Mausoleum's barrier only for an instant, just enough to let you in. Then I'll use the two of you as blood sacrifices to open it again. But who could have expected that before Zhenmo left its sheath, it would be thrust back inside? At some point, Tianlongjun had moved to stand behind Luo Binghe and pressed the sword back into its sheath with a single finger, completely preventing Luo Binghe from drawing it. Luo Binghe's reaction was extraordinarily swift. He turned to respond, but no matter how fast he moved, he only managed to draw Zhenmo 3 inches at most before it was shoved back in. After a few of these exchanges, Tianlongjun seemed to lose interest in teasing Luo Binghe, and with a flick of his wrist, he ignored Zhenmo and directly pressed down on Luo Binghe's skull instead. Luo Binghe's eyes snapped open. A dense cloud of purple-black chi roiled atop his head. Tianlongjun lifted his hand, took a look at Luo Binghe's snow-pale face, and commented indifferently, "He looks like his mother." "His eyes look like yours," came a chill voice from the side. Tianlongjun slowly turned his head. Cold light glimmered off of Zhuya's blade as it pressed against Zhu Xilong's neck. "It would be a bad deal for you to lose such a good subordinate and darling nephew," Shen QingQiu said with a faint smile. "Shouldn't Tianlongjun take the time to consider that?" "My lord, the subordinate was incautious," Zhu Xilong said quietly. Even when he was being incautious, Zhu Xilong had been rather difficult to get a hold of. It had taken a great deal of effort on Shen QingQiu's part just to restrain him. Even when he wasn't in snake form, this fellow was just as slippery. Zhu Xilong is a bit foolish. "He is quite emotionally fragile," Tianlongjun said lightly. "If you treat him like this, you'll break his heart." "My lord, I'm not foolish," Zhu Xilong weakly protested. "Meanwhile, I'm not emotionally fragile at all. But I am heartbroken that you're treating my disciple like this," Shen QingQiu said, half serious. "Release my disciple and I'll release your nephew, all right?" Tianlongjun spread his hands. "I'm just afraid I won't have the chance." In truth, Shen QingQiu's palms were clammy with cold sweat, his voice the only thing calm and collected about him. I'm giving you the chance right now. I meant, Tian Longjun said. I'm afraid Jushi Long won't give me the chance. Tian Longjun had just barely finished speaking when Jushi Long suddenly threw himself at Shen QingQiu's sword point. The force he used was extraordinary, like it really was a matter of life and death, and Shen QingQiu didn't for a moment suspect he was fainting. He startled and subconsciously withdrew his blade. As soon as he did, Jushi Long seized the opportunity to escape and dashed back to Tian Longjun's side. Tian Longjun made a see sort of expression and chuckled. I told you. Jushi Long is a bit foolish. If someone tried to hold him hostage against me, he would seek death himself. Peak Lord Shen must not underestimate him. Shen QingQiu almost coughed up blood. Jushi Long really had no value to speak of as a hostage. Not only was he hard to catch, even after you finally got a hold of him, it didn't feel like it was a worthwhile venture at all. But since my nephew had to suffer this little grievance, Tian Longjun said, it's only reasonable to recoup the loss on Peak Lord Shen's disciple. As he spoke, his fingers slightly curled. Luo Binghe let out a stifled groan and blood flowed from the corner of his eyes. But those eyes still turned towards Shen QingQiu with great difficulty, and he ground out through the blood foaming on his mouth, go anywhere you want, just don't stay here. Shen QingQiu snapped his head up and he threw Zhu Ya forward. It streaked towards Tian Longjun like a white arc of lightning, but Tian Longjun only barely tilted his head and the blade brushed by his cheek before nailing into the mural far behind him with a clang. Your aim isn't very good, said Tian Longjun. It is very good. Shen QingQiu slowly pulled his arm back and a faint smile curved the corner of his mouth. I hit bullseye. Tian Longjun paused and then immediately turned around to see that Zhu Ya was stabbed into the mural, right inside the smiling woman's eye. The jewel that had been inlaid as her pupil shattered into pieces, which fell from the stone wall in a twinkling shower. The woman was undoubtedly just a face painted on the wall, but the corners of her smiling mouth curved higher and higher, like she herself was growing happier and happier. The change continued until it split the split of her mouth reached her ears, and she was like a grinning with the slit-mouthed woman's bloody maw. What? Suddenly, a burst of piercing laughter erupted into the mausoleum hall, and this sound came from the mural woman's mouth. It's like the Cave of Wonders! I was like, is this like the Cave of Wonders? You can't touch the Cave of Wonders. The thunder! The Hall of Delight had anti-theft measures. Ooh, the mural was inlaid all over with precious stones, but if you pried even one single one, you could only sit and wait to be laughed to death by the Hall of Delight's demoness and her sound wave attack. It is like the Cave of Wonders! Go! The effect of this laughter was especially evident on demons. After all, the primary intruders the defenses were designed to target were roving demonic tomb raiders. Scant few humans were bored or gutsy enough to go tomb raiding in the demon realm. Upon hearing this laughter, your heart and brain would pound without end, and there'd be a wave of acute pain, and the world around you would spin as your vision blurred, so it basically induced migraines, which suck. Zhu Long couldn't help but cover his ears, and Tian Longjun also spared a hand to press against his temple. Shen QingQiu had long prepared for this turn of events, and using this split second, that's when he was looking at the murals earlier. Nice, nice! He swept across the hall. With a wave of his left hand, Zhu Ya flew back into its sheath, and with his right hand, he grabbed Luo Binghe and ran. There we go! As soon as he charged into the next mausoleum hall, the first thing Shen QingQiu did was drop the gates and drop them tight. The enormous heavy slab of stone thudded to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. He could only find the mechanism to close the door, but not the one that had been used to open it, although it would be ideal if this door didn't open at all. As soon as he had this thought and finally was able to relax, he turned his head. What he saw made him collapse to his knees on the spot. Oh no! Zhu Long blinked at Shen QingQiu. One arm held tightly in his grasp. He'd really done it this time. He'd actually managed to leave the father-son duo currently engaged in a one-sided demonic domestic violence within the Hall of Delight. How? This was too severe an offense. A criminal case was about to happen in there. Shen QingQiu whipped his arm away, turned, and went to strike at the stone door, but Zhu Long stopped him. Oh, immortal Shen, don't go back. He has no chance against my lord. Shen QingQiu was on the verge of a collapse. How could he have grabbed the wrong person from such a close distance? The Hall of Delight's mural's woman's laughing attack must have been too strong. The light from those green candles too dim, and on top of that, all three of the other men were wearing black robes that looked about the same at first glance. Was it because they were relatives, that their taste in color and style were basically identical? Immortal Master Shen didn't grab the wrong person, said Zhu Xilong. I swapped out the arm you grabbed. This was the last straw for Shen QingQiu, and he slammed his fist in the stone door. I was trying to take Luo Binghe! Immortal Master Shen, didn't he already take you long ago? Zhu Xilong paused and asked in confusion. Shen QingQiu was speechless. There was really no way to talk to these people. He raised a hand gesturing for Zhu Xilong to shut up. Then he turned and walked a few steps, and he suddenly realized the floor beneath his feet wasn't entirely smooth. When Zhu Xilong tried to follow him, he hurried out an arm to stop him. Don't move. An enormous woman's face was painted across the entire floor of this grand hall. They were currently standing on her ear. Unlike the woman in the Hall of Delight, this face had none of the flirtatious beauty. Instead, it was fierce and fiendish, its narrow eyes bulging in rage above a wide nose. The effect was unsurpassably hideous, looking like a female Yashka, which is a type of spirit in Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, and other mythologies that may be benevolent or capricious, and the dark kind are said to devour humans. Don't step on the face, Shen QingQiu said with caution. Zhu Xilong was silent. The whole floor was a face. Where would you step if not the face? The three halls of delight, fury, and sorrow came one after the other. After the first hall of delight, the hall of fury immediately followed. When the original Luo Binghe had toured, aka looted, the Holy Mausoleum, he had cleared this level by using a special sequence of steps to cross it. Unfortunately, Shen QingQiu didn't clearly remember where exactly he had stepped. If a single one was wrong, the anti-theft measures in the Hall of Fury would be activated. You couldn't even fly over the face on your sword because as long as you passed directly above any spot on the floor, it counted as a step. Oh, that's smart. Okay. That said, of course you'd get angry if someone stepped in your face. No wonder this was the Hall of Fury. Shen QingQiu had the gall to rush in here because he thought he'd grabbed Luo Binghe, who definitely knew the step sequence. But he could never have expected that this snake would be slippery enough to swap himself within a split second. The ground grew hotter and hotter. The woman's face on the ground had originally been a scarlet hue, but it darkened to crimson as the heat surged. Shen QingQiu crouched down to test the temperature, but he had to pull his hand back as soon as he touched the ground. It was as hot as if fire blazed beneath the floor, and even standing on it would roast you if you like meat on a hot plate. They must have unknowingly stepped on the face a few times already. Shen QingQiu retreated a few steps, getting as close to the edge of the room as possible. Suddenly, a red liquid burst from the ground in a fountain, blazing with a searing, bright, hot golden glow. Zhu Xilong immediately shifted into his original form, a yellow-eyed green snake coiled on the ground, scales aglow. He reared his upper body and let out a hissing cry, reaching the height of 4 men. And then wrapped Shen QingQiu in a mass of coils, enveloping him securely within a layer of scaly armor. In this position, Zhu Xilong's gleaming fangs were right next to Shen QingQiu's head. And those giant golden eyes were even more upsetting and close. Tianlongjun was right. Zhu Xilong was really a bit foolish. Had he forgotten about the time that he had drenched in real gar fumes to the point of tears? Had he forgotten how Shen QingQiu pointed a sword at him just minutes ago? With how hard Zhu Xilong was working to protect him even now, Shen QingQiu was practically too embarrassed to take advantage of him. Suddenly, with an enormous roar and crash, the entire wall of the Hall of Fury collapsed. Tianlongjun rotated his wrist as he made his way down the pile of rubble, though through the floating dust he stepped into the hall. Am I mistaken, or does Peak Lord Shen seem more familiar with this holy mausoleum than even me? Zhu Xilong transformed back into human form. My lord, don't come in, he cried. Before a questioning expression could appear on Tianlongjun's face, he had already taken 6 or 7 steps across the woman's face on the floor. Shen QingQiu was speechless. Zhu Xilong was speechless too. A pillar of magma, thick enough for 4 men to encircle, with their arms outstretched, exploded upwards. Tianlongjun was instantly engulfed in the raging blaze. Shen QingQiu internally howled with laughter. Well, you see what happens when you don't let others finish talking? See what happens when you beat up your darling son? You can act badass and act as hard as you can, but pride goeth before the fall. However, very soon, he He was unable to laugh any further. Luo Binghe staggered as he followed close behind. Tianlongjun had also charged in. One of his arms hung slack at his side and had been completely broken. Blood poured from his head, and one of his eyes couldn't even open anymore. How wretched! Luo Binghe was in even worse state than when Shen QingQiu first laid eyes upon him in his arrival into this world, when the original flavor had beaten him. What was up with Luo Binghe's constitution? Why did his elders all like to teach him lessons with violence? This isn't Bison Peak! Zhu Xilong anxiously circled that pillar of fire, too preoccupied for anything else. Luo Binghe scanned the scene within the hall and then looked down. He jumped from the pile of rubble and took a few rapid steps before arriving at Shen QingQiu's side in a flash. This was unscientific. How come a single glance was all he needed to know where to step so as not to trigger the mechanism? As if Luo Binghe knew what he was thinking, he concisely explained himself. You step on the acupoints. As he spoke, he and Shen QingQiu had already crossed the Hall of Fury and entered the next room. While the stone gate lowered, I guess they just left Zhu Xilong to look after the erupted, lava-encrusted dad. What? I've got to keep going. We'll go back and talk about this later. Okay. As he spoke, Shen QingQiu and him had already crossed the Hall of Fury and entered the next room. While the stone gates lowered, Shen QingQiu couldn't help but take a few more glances at Luo Binghe, confirming that this time he didn't have the wrong person. Shen QingQiu hesitated at the periphery of the mausoleum hall, afraid to make a hasty move. The demoness of the Hall of Sorrow was perched on the zenith of the hall. When he looked up, as expected, a woman's face was drawn there, with her brows tightly knit in an expression of graceful woe. Sensing the intruders, the face's eyes opened, and its features twisted into even more of a miserable expression. I love the three women in the halls. Like, this is so cool. A few drops of water seeped from its eyes, and before long, a dense rain drizzled from the entire ceiling. Is it going to try to drown them? Shen QingQiu was just about to speak up and warn Luo Binghe that this was corpse rain, and they ought to not let it touch their bodies, when Luo Binghe raised one of his arms to cover Shen QingQiu and ran straight across. Just like that, Shen QingQiu was dragged to the level at top speed. The original Luo Binghe had favored exacting technique. What was up with them now? This method was far too simple and crude. The three halls of delight, fury, and sorrow were a subplot that had stretched on for 200,000 words! If one converted the events that had just transpired, it wouldn't amount to a single chapter. Hey! The Hall of Sorrow should have dragged on for at least 10 before it concluded, but now, was that even enough for 3 lines? The system chirped out a notification. Cut down on filler plot. Refine the storyline. B points plus 100. This was too much cutting! After they exited the 3 holy halls, they found themselves in a dark and silent corridor. As soon as they entered it, green flames lit up dimly, row after row, stretching endlessly into the distance. The anti-theft measures of the Holy Mausoleum were practically dense enough to ward off a fly, and to an insane degree. Last breath candle arrays were piled everywhere. They didn't cost a cent, and the blind corpses that had been wandering aimlessly in the earlier corridors now approached, saliva dripping from their mouths. Luo Binghe raised his hand, a cold and impatient look on his face. The corpses let out a series of low, lamenting hisses, panting breaths rumbling in their throats before retreating into the shadows with lowered heads. Oh, because it's Luo Binghe, so make him go away. Without sparing Shen QingQiu a glance, Luo Binghe put his hand down and said, "Let's go." Shen QingQiu noticed that Luo Binghe's face was incredibly red. Under the dim green candlelight, the color was excessively and exceedingly obvious. But it absolutely didn't seem like a blush of embarrassment. Every time Luo Binghe caught Shen QingQiu before, he had stared at him like he was trying to stare through him. But this time, he didn't so much as look. Upon realizing that Shen QingQiu was looking at him, Luo Binghe even avoided his gaze, subconsciously using his unbroken left hand to wipe away the bloodstains by his eyes. Shen QingQiu wondered if Luo Binghe had been poisoned, or if maybe he had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage during the fight, but Luo Binghe's gait was still steady, so that didn't seem to be the issue. He was just about to ask when Luo Binghe spoke first, "Are the meridians of that body working well?" Shen QingQiu had never expected this to be Luo Binghe's first question. He paused and then replied, "They're working normally." It seemed that every time they fell into a silence, Luo Binghe was the first to break it. Though, when he thought about it, Luo Binghe had spent 5 years fixing every one of his body's meridians, bit by bit. Luo Binghe nodded. That's good. I preserved the other body for a few days, but it still withered in the end. That doesn't bode well if anything goes wrong with this one. Once the soul left a body created by the dew mushroom, it instantly died, and then went on to wither and dissolve. For Luo Binghe to have actually sustained it for several days, who knew how much spiritual energy he had wasted on the endeavor? And he still dared to storm the Holy Mausoleum by himself right afterward. Shen QingQiu felt a tightness in his chest, and his thoughts were scattered and uneasy as a mess as he tried to find some random topic of conversation. Tianlongjun had mentioned that Luo Binghe brought 2 strays with him, so Shen QingQiu asked, well, who else did you bring? Luo Binghe finally gave him a glance. I came alone, he said. Then, those 2 aren't good companions. He continued only after a pause. Even if Shizun doesn't want to stay with me, I hope he wouldn't associate with them. What? Well, then who are they? What's going on? Chapter 59. Thank goodness we have one more chapter left. It sounded like this wasn't Luo Binghe's first rendezvous with Tianlongjun and Zhu Xilong. Well, you've met them before? Shen QingQiu asked. I engaged that snake at the southern border, Luo Binghe said mildly. We fought a few times, but he nearly got the better of me. I've never seen the other one before, but I couldn't defeat him. Zhu Xilong was from the southern border, so he'd naturally be at his best in that environment. Tianlongjun had said that Jinlan City plague was originally wrought to resolve a food shortage in that territory, so it was to be expected that Luo Binghe might have fought Zhu Xilong there. But it seemed that Zhu Xilong had never explained his identity to Luo Binghe, nor had he treated him as the young master of the family. Tianlongjun didn't seem inclined to do so either, so it looked that neither the father nor cousin had any intention of acknowledging Luo Binghe. Though Luo Binghe's stride was steady, he walked with a faint limp, but he kept his back straight, and he didn't use the wall to support himself. Shen QingQiu felt mixed emotions at the sight of this. After awkwardly hesitating for a moment, he stilled his resolve and stepped forward to support Luo Binghe. Just then, the candles suddenly flickered. The tomb corridor dimmed, and Luo Binghe loomed over him. However, this time Luo Binghe didn't pull him into a forceful embrace, nor did he get handsy. He just completely collapsed against Shen QingQiu, and then he didn't move a mote. After so long running every which way, Shen QingQiu was also utterly exhausted. Unable to support the weight of 2 people, he slammed into the stone wall with a thud. Luo Binghe fell sideways into him, all limp, with his head cracked against the wall, letting out a loud thunk. Shen QingQiu's heart clenched along with the noise, and his gums ached in sympathy. He rapidly got to his feet and put his arms around Luo Binghe, patting around until his hands reached Luo Binghe's back. The clothes across that back were ragged, corroded through by the corpse rain in the Hall of Sorrow. When Shen QingQiu reached further, he found the texture of skin underneath. The clothing was all wrong, as if it was rotting. It was already beginning to smell. After all, there was nothing good about corpse rain. When no one else was around, Shen QingQiu's preferred method of waking up other men was to give them 2 light slaps to the face. But before he'd even extended his hands, he figured he couldn't bear to do so, and so instead he lightly patted Luo Binghe's cheek and subconsciously, also lowering his voice, Luo Binghe, Luo Binghe. But Luo Binghe's eyelids were so heavy that the lashes didn't so much as tremble. In addition, his face was still flushed and abnormal red. When Shen QingQiu reached up to touch it, both his forehead and cheeks were scalding hot, as if he had a fever. However, Luo Binghe's body shouldn't have known the concept of fever. Even if he occasionally ended up in dire straits, it never lasted long, nor would it get so bad that he lost consciousness. When Shen QingQiu reached down to touch Luo Binghe's hands, they were ice cold. It was like his head was in a furnace while the rest of his body was in a freezer. Because his body is all screwed up with the energy. Shen QingQiu put one hand on the back of Luo Binghe's head, rubbing the place where it crashed into the wall. Binghe, can you hear me? No response. Shen QingQiu counted up the causes. In order to protect Shen QingQiu's body and prevent it from withering, Luo Binghe had exhausted several days' worth of spiritual energy, but in the end, he'd still failed. Then he'd gone around catching all those black moon rhinoceros pythons. After that, he'd come to the Holy Mausoleum. Tianlongjun had beaten him up, and he'd been assaulted by the sound attack in the Hall of Delight. Then Tianlong Jin continued beating him up, and finally he'd been soaked in corpse rain. No matter how you looked at it, this was much more serious than a fever. Oh, we ain't done with chapter 59 yet, bitch. Don't you even. Part 16, melting ice. Oh! Melt that ice, baby. Come on, Peerless Cucumber. You get them sympathy points. Let's go. After Luo Binghe passed out, his presence... What we got here? Making sure I get my pages right. Yes. After Luo Binghe passed out, his presence lost its suppressive effect, and the blind corpses that had retreated into the shadows began to stir again, coming to surround them as hissing groans escaped their throats. Shen QingQiu held Luo Binghe's limp body with one hand and Zhu Yao with the other. With the whip of his arm, the sword flew from its sheath like an arrow and stabbed through a dozen corpses in its first sweep. However, the snow-bright blade caught light very well, and when the green glow of the last breath candles reflected off the sword, its glint grew even more piercing. Between the blind corpses' hypersensitivity to light and their quick dodges, this trick wouldn't work a second time. Right after Shen QingQiu returned the sword to its sheath, at his waist several withered hands reached for him, and one even went for Luo Binghe's eyes. Ah! Shen QingQiu swept with a spiritual blast, bursting that unruly blind corpse's head into confetti. But though spiritual blasts were an effective maneuver, one couldn't rely on them exclusively. They expended too much spiritual energy, and before long, your stores would run dry. In addition, Shen QingQiu had returned to his original state where he had 2 bars of battery, where he couldn't be as unrestrained as he was with the Doom Mushroom form. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Shit, nope. After releasing 20 or so attacks, he felt himself waning slightly. The blind corpses jostled back and forth in the corridor, and he could only kick them away one by one. Though these monsters were low level, they never stopped coming, and he was holding a woozy Luo Binghe. As he was sent staggering, his grip slipped for a moment, and Luo Binghe's head crashed into the stone wall again. Maybe it'll knock some sense into him. Who knows? Maybe it'll jostle some things around. That thunk sounded especially painful. Shen QingQiu guiltily cradled the back of Luo Binghe's head in his hand, touching it again and again. He kept feeling like a giant lump had begun to swell there. Well, first a fever, now a bump. Let's not give this child brain damage, okay? That might actually help, so you might not be bothered by it. Weak mobs were still troublesome, and staying in this tomb corridor full of last breath candles would only attract endless waves of blind corpses. Shen QingQiu changed positions and hauled an arm of Luo Binghe's over his shoulder, and then bolted away, dragging him along like a comet trailing its tail. He left the blind corpses several meters behind, but his harried breath made the last breath candles light up one after another, cloaking them in an inescapable glow. Though the blind corpses didn't catch up, he couldn't lose them either. They were dogged in their pursuit until Shen QingQiu passed a small chamber as he turned the corner. This might have been a preparation chamber. Coffins were scattered throughout the room in disarray, and the lids of some had been overturned on the floor, resulting in the atmosphere that was neither serious nor solemn. Oh! Shen QingQiu quickly dragged Luo Binghe inside, checking the coffins one by one. Some contained withered corpses lying in strange positions, but some were empty. Oh, wouldn't be an MXTX story without a coffin scene, baby! The hissing outside the chamber grew closer and closer, and long wavering shadows weaved wildly on the floor. As the situation was getting dangerous, Shen QingQiu leapt into a stone coffin. He also wanted to stuff Luo Binghe in another one, but there was no time. They tumbled into the same casket, entangled together. Yeah! Even though a layer of soft material padded the bottom, when Shen QingQiu slammed down inside, stars filled his vision. Luo Binghe was on top, and Shen QingQiu was on the bottom. So he was smooshed under a considerable weight and almost unable to draw another breath. What had this child been eating? He looked quite slim, so how was he this heavy? Furthermore, the lid of the coffin was only shut halfway. Oh my god! Shen QingQiu was about to reach to close it when the green light flickered outside and several stooped black shadows appeared on the ceiling. The blind corpses had come inside. Oh my god! No! They shoveled into the preparation chamber, making... Okay, they aren't in the coffin yet. Okay. Making the occasional quiet tap against the furnishings, as well as rasping their sharp fingernails in the stone coffins. The result was blood-curdlingly eerie. Like they're just like tapping on it. If there was any place that was definitely without last breath candles, it was the coffin's interiors. As long as no light source appeared, those blind fools would be unable to catch them. Shen QingQiu stayed calm and lay there facing up. Luo Binghe was on top of him facing down, his head buried in the crook of Shen QingQiu's shoulder, an uncomfortable heat against his neck. Even Shen QingQiu was uncomfortable, Luo Binghe had to be even more so. Luo Binghe's hands were freezing while his head was hot, so Shen QingQiu feared he might as well use Luo Binghe's hands to cool his forehead. While he thought this was a good idea, he was just about to grab Luo Binghe's wrist. His entire body froze. 5 bone-thin fingers with long claw-like fingernails appeared above the coffin. Why was their search so meticulous? Wasn't the IQ of blind corpses supposed to be super low? Didn't these things entirely ignore anything that didn't give off light? Shen QingQiu suddenly realized that next to his cheek, something really was giving off a dim red glow. When he looked, though Luo Binghe's eyes were closed, the heavenly demon mark of sin had appeared on his forehead, lines of crimson pulsing along with his breaths. The red glow flickered on and off again along with it. Though Shen QingQiu knew this mark of sin was a manifestation of his bloodline's fall from the heavens, he didn't think it needed to be so bright, did it? Why did it look like that thing on Ultraman's chest that flashed on and off whenever he was at the end of a fight and nearly out of battery? Oh my god, wait! Shen QingQiu's whole motif is being green, like a fully charged battery, and now Luo Binghe's the battery running out of energy. Oh my god, no! Shen QingQiu couldn't spare a hand to cover that damn mark, so before he could even think, he turned his head and pressed the side of his mouth against that smooth forehead. It looked a bit like he was kissing Luo Binghe's brow. But don't mind the details. There are extenuating circumstances. Survival comes first. Of course, right? Why didn't you use your hand? I guess because you couldn't spare a hand? What? So you used your mouth? That spindly hand entangled a few strands of hair, its fingernails clogged with muck, and reached tremblingly into the stone coffin to grope around. The casket was narrow but deep, and as long as it only felt around with the upper range, it wouldn't touch the 2 people lying inside. But this hand had absolutely no sense of restraint. As it reached deeper and deeper, Shen QingQiu's heart rose higher and higher in his throat. Just as it was about to touch Luo Binghe's spine, Shen QingQiu gritted his teeth, extracted his right arm, which was going numb from the weight, and found a mostly intact place on Luo Binghe's back to pull him farther down. Now Luo Binghe's whole upper torso was entirely pressed to his. There had been a gap between them before, but now they had become practically interlocked, chest to chest, abdomen to abdomen. A person's abdomen is supposed to be the softest spot on their body, but Luo Binghe's was uncomfortably hard against Shen QingQiu's stomach. The farther down as he pulled him, the more he was sure that Luo Binghe had an 8-pack. He's ripped. He has an 8-pack. I heard Kylo Ren's shredded. Was that a rock slab down there? Well. You sure that's abs that you're talking about, Shen QingQiu? Though the hand stopped searching down just before it reached Luo Binghe's back, it changed directions instead and started groping in the other direction. As it was about to touch Luo Binghe's calves, Shen QingQiu steeled himself and spread his legs, letting Luo Binghe's left leg fall in between the 2 of his. Well, he had already minimized the space between the 2 of them that took up as much as he could. He really couldn't make them any smaller. The blind corpse's trembling hand continued to feel about for a while, and finding nothing at all, it slowly withdrew. Only after all the blind corpses left the preparation chamber with dissatisfied rumbles milling off into the distance did Shen QingQiu let out a sigh of relief. Their current position was entirely too improper. If someone looked inside the coffin at any moment, they'd definitely think that Shen QingQiu was in the throes of lust, clinging to Luo Binghe and refusing to let go, pulling him into his arms as if he wanted to meld their bodies together. He was about to push Luo Binghe into a sitting position when a voice suddenly spoke in the preparation chamber. It's far too early to relax. The voice was aged and had a mocking tone. Shen QingQiu immediately grabbed Zhuya and flipped himself over, protecting Luo Binghe beneath him as he sat up in full alert, brandishing the sword. Who is it? The horde of blind corpses had left. This mausoleum chamber was completely empty of anything except the frigid stone coffins filling the room. Is it Meng Mo? Don't tell me another corpse woke up from one of these. I looked through everything, and pretty much all of them were just dry goods. The voice spoke again. If this elder wanted to go unseen, even if you searched the entirety of the Holy Mausoleum, you wouldn't find him. Only after these words did Shen QingQiu realize the voice was imminently familiar. He had definitely heard it from somewhere before, and more than once, in a sudden flash of realization, he returned his sword to its sheath. Since it's Senior Meng Mo, there's no need to act so cryptic. As soon as the words left his mouth, the old man appeared in the center of the preparation chamber. He wore opulent robes. Opulent! And his gaze was as sharp as a hawk's. He sat cross-legged in one of the coffins, arrogantly looking down at Shen QingQiu. So you remember this elder? If Senior Meng Mo has appeared before me, then I must be dreaming, Shen QingQiu said. Before, Meng Mo had only appeared in dream realms in the form of a cloud or a black fog, but now he could manifest a human form. It looked like he had recovered quite well in Luo Binghe's body, but seeing that the newcomer was the portable grandfather who always was on Luo Binghe's side, Shen QingQiu relaxed. Meng Mo humphed, but your current predicament is in no way a dream. Could I ask for Senior Meng Mo's assistance in entering Luo Binghe's dream realm to wake him up? Shen QingQiu asked. I can't wake him. Ah? Shen QingQiu began to panic, nearly breaking character. Why not? Had the fever already damaged Luo Binghe's brain? I can't get in, Meng Mo said mildly. Right now, this brat's spirit is in complete chaos, a field of nothingness filled with fog. He's sunk into a dream from which he cannot wake. This elder has only seen such circumstances within the dreams of two kinds of people, one of which is the fatally ill who are close to death. None of that sounded like it was anything good, but if the former was fatally ill and on the verge of death, then the latter couldn't be worse, right? And the other? Shen QingQiu patiently asked. The mentally infirm. Shen QingQiu said a lot of nothing. The brat brought it on himself, Meng Mo continued, as if speaking to himself. In the past 5 years, he warms... He's come to give exposition about all of this. Well, by God, let's go! In the past 5 years, he wore himself down performing soul-summoning rituals by day while massacring his own dream realm creations by night. This elder told him at the start this was no different from destroying his own spirit, but he ignored that advice. This day was coming sooner or later. In the past few days, he exhausted his spiritual energy to preserve that dew mushroom body of yours, and that demonic sword took the opportunity to revolt. Then he barged into the Holy Mausoleum and went toe-to-toe with the most talented heir to the heavenly demon bloodline in the history of our race. Shen QingQiu gripped Zhuya so hard his hand started to hurt. He looked back at Luo Binghe lying dead to the world in the stone coffin and asked, Senior truly has no way to wake him up. I'm powerless to help. Shen QingQiu cupped his hands in a bow, and silently lay back down in the coffin. Meng Mo raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? I'm sleeping until I wake up. Blue veins popped on Meng Mo's forehead. Will you dare to ignore this elder? Shen QingQiu closed his eyes. Since Senior said he was powerless to help, then I can only wait until I wake up to get him out of here myself. Meng Mo humphed. Our race's Holy Mausoleum is forbidden territory, full of dangers, and there are 2 troublesome characters lying in wait. You can't protect him alone. His words were correct. Very correct. Shen QingQiu opened his eyes again and sighed, but in this moment, other than I, his master, who else can protect him? Or to put it another way, who else would protect him? Countless feelings ran through Shen QingQiu in an endless onslaught, and his emotions were a mess, but he was very clear on one thing. No matter what, he couldn't let Luo Binghe die here. After so many years, you're finally willing to admit this brat is your disciple, and you are his Shizun? Meng Mo said in a cold voice. It's certainly been a long time, Shen QingQiu said. He was waiting for Meng Mo to continue with snide mockery, but instead the old man suddenly sighed. If this brat could wake up and hear those words of yours, who knows how overjoyed he'd be. Gramps, could you not make every word so inauspicious? Shen QingQiu's face darkened with dismay. What did Meng Mo mean, if Luo Binghe could wake up? This tone, like the one in question was on the brink of life and death, was only giving Shen QingQiu even more anxiety, okay? Meng Mo was suddenly overcome with rage. I'm clearly this kid Shifu. Just how much have I taught him, eh? He shouted. Power to overturn the heavens. Techniques to manipulate every heart, yet he refuses to call me Shifu. Senior this, senior that. You, a common cultivator, merely taught him a few superficial forms and half-baked techniques, but he chases after you, crying and yelling and calling you Shizun. It drives me up a wall. This massive rage had been building in Meng Mo's belly for a while. And the sight of those two lying in the same coffin was even more irritating to his eyes. He was going blind. He was extremely unhappy, supremely grouchy. Shen QingQiu wasn't happy either. He was already upset at the suggestion that Sangjiang Mountain's sword techniques were superficial. And he was just about to retort when Meng Mo exploded again, pacing back and forth on the coffin with his hands behind his back. Well, if only I had seamlessly gotten rid of you in the dream realm back then. These complications would never have arisen today. This brat was a moldable talent with incredible potential, but as soon as he met you, he turned into this maddeningly good-for-nothing, and he still pretends at it while you're around, trying to act all aloof. This way, this elder sees it. He should either kill you or do you. Making such a fuss, will he, won't he? It's infuriating even to watch! Shen QingQiu really wished he could cover his ears, or perhaps stitch Meng Mo's mouth shut. He shot a glance at Luo Binghe's quietly sleeping visage, the image of his disciple's crying face flashing through his head for a moment before he immediately looked away. Senior, aren't these words a bit inappropriate to say to my face? He snapped, unable to bear it. Are you done? If you're done, can you let me wake up? Meng Mo was still angry. Wake up! You wouldn't even know how to get out, even if you did wake up. The entrance has opened, and it has already closed. It might be possible to open it again, Shen QingQiu said. Senior, please tell me which direction I should head in to find a place where Luo Binghe broke through the barrier using the Black Moon Rhinoceros pythons. His gaze landed on Jin Mo, which hung at Luo Binghe's waist. The place where he had broken into the mausoleum would still be weak, and if it were slashed once more with Jin Mo's dimension-rending abilities, it might open again. Meng Mo looked in the direction of his gaze and understood his intentions, but remained skeptical. That sword may not allow you to use it. Of course, Shen QingQiu knew that as well, and he gritted his teeth. Well, there's no other choice, he said gravely to himself. I have to try. When he woke, he was still lying in the stone coffin, and Luo Binghe was lying on top of him where Shen QingQiu had left him, held tightly in his embrace. Thank the heavens, that bothersome old gremlin Meng Mo had finally been willing to release him. Shen QingQiu was about to sit up when suddenly his right leg seemed to brush something stiff that jabbed the inside of his thigh. Oh my God! At first, Shen QingQiu thought it was his sword hilt, and he absent-mindedly reached down to move it. But as soon as he touched the object, the system suddenly exploded with messages. Yo! Protagonist satisfaction points 1,000. Congratulations on unlocking the achievement Physical Relationship Advancement. At that moment, Shen QingQiu also stiffened into a dried husk. The hell did physical relationship advancement mean? And then he looked down. This sword hilt was in fact something quite impressive. The heavenly pillar. It was the heavenly pillar! Ah! Shen QingQiu was going to kill everyone in this room, and then himself! After flailing around for a while, he slapped himself across the face and reasoned with himself logically. One couldn't tell day from night in the Holy Mausoleum, so maybe it was morning outside right now. Therefore, this was a natural phenomenon. This was a normal bodily function. It would go away on its own, right? That's how it usually went. Yes, that's right. But just sitting it there and not doing anything about it, well, wasn't that a bit pitiful? Well, there was nothing to be done about it. He couldn't exactly help Luo Binghe jerk off under these circumstances, right? If he just pretended he hadn't seen anything, he probably would be forgiven, right? Now noticed that on the cover here, not only is it them holding hands and walking away from these figures, but these figures are also pointing their swords at Luo Binghe and Shen QingQiu, and also these swords are also phallic symbols. god! What? I'm so glad we're back to 3 chapters for a reading, because 3 chapters, you get a good savory chunk of reading when you get to 3 chapters. Last week was not enough. I was ready to dive into this week because I was like, last week 2 chapters, a paltry 2 chapters. Oh hell no! I was like, I need a good 3 chapter chunk, and it ends right where it does. Oh my god! So we get 2 pictures. We get 2 pictures this time, which is like, of course we might as well get 2. The first one, you talk about Daddy Tianlongjun. Hello. Which now it feels like Mo Beijun, Tianlongjun. Is Mo Beijun related to Luo Binghe? I'm assuming, since they're all like, or is that the hierarchy of the demons where he's a noble demon up there, Mo Beijun is? But Tianlongjun looks a lot like Luo Binghe. A lot like Luo Binghe. He has a bit more of a vampire. He reminds me of, not Lestat from Interview with the Vampire. He reminds me of, in the 1990s movie, Armand. He reminds me of Armand, who, Antonio Banderas played. But yeah, Armand is like the head vampire, and so he reminds me of the head vampire. Yeah, in his looks and appearance. Also, gonna make note, that candle there that's lighting is also another phallic symbol. There's a lot of dick references in this chapter set. I was honestly surprised it took us as long as womp womp womp. I'm surprised it took us as far into the chapter as it did for Luo Binghe to remember, or for Shen QingQiu to remember that, yes, in fact, Luo Binghe has a penis. It is supposedly massive, and you're just now noticing it's pressed up against you. How you didn't notice before now? I guess Impending Doom kind of does that. And they were in a dream sequence with Meng Mo for a hot second, so feels legit. We're going to talk about Meng Mo. It's good to know he's still around, just loitering and being grumpy as a portable grandfather. But speaking of, he ain't no grandfather. He's a daddy. He's a daddy, and he's a deadbeat dad. Man, fine, MXTX. Make us feel bad for Luo Binghe. Why don't ya? We're going to talk about this chapter set. The other picture is, we're going to talk about the whole coffin scene, because MXTX can't resist a story without a good coffin scene. That's for damn sure. The other coffin scene is this one. It's really good. And of course, Shen QingQiu has to like suck on the beauty mark above Luo Binghe's forehead so that the corpses don't see him. Yeah, seems legit, doesn't it? Yeah. So yeah, just getting a nice start to these chapters. We have a long way to go. This volume is going to be a long one, and I'm kind of excited about it because volume 2 went by way too quickly, and now it feels like this chapter had a lot of twists and turns. We had a lot happen, which we're going to talk about in a short amount of time. MXTX ain't messing around. She's not wasting no time. The whole point of this story is that it was too damn long to begin with. We're cutting down the filler, and it's like, oh shit, we're getting to the nitty-gritty. But we need to talk about this chapter set because there are things going on at play that we need to probably address and bring to light, because I have a feeling they're going to be important later. Yeah, so, oh my god. So yeah, there were a lot of moments in this chapter set that I wanted to stop and talk, but then I was like, I was so into the momentum of the story, and I was like, no, I want to keep going, that I didn't want to like slow down because I was afraid I'd get on a tangent and it would like just take the pacing out. But this chapter set, MXTX loves a good dungeon crawl, doesn't she? I feel like this chapter set in particular was very, very, very drawn in a way that I can see how a Heaven Official's Blessing was referential to this. I can see how that was happening. I can see that's the case. There's one Modao Zushi moment in here that we're going to talk about real quick when we get to Tianlongjun, but other than that, I could see in so many ways how Heaven Official's Blessing was inspired by this chapter set, because MXTX loves to draw people going through corridors where there are creepy things, and it's like a damn dungeon crawl, and what can we do? So Zhuxi Long's character, he is basically, if we're going to talk about Modao Zushi, there are 2 aspects of this chapter set that reminded me of Modao Zushi. One, Zhuxi Long is kind of like the character Wen Ning from Modao Zushi. I get those same vibes. I feel like Wen Ning is a little bit more lovable and a little bit more on the protagonist's side, quote unquote. But Zhu Xilong is just kind of like not pathetic, but just very simple. He's very cute and simple, and he's like, all of these men, all these heavenly demon men have a thing for Shen QingQiu, and it's a problem. Shen QingQiu is the one with the harem. Can we talk about that? So where's my marker here? So let's talk about Luo Binghe. Let's talk about Shen QingQiu and his track record so far. Let's back up to this track record, shall we? Now, Ning Ying, bless her heart, she admires Shen QingQiu, but it's like definitely like a little sister-student relationship. But we need to start back from the beginning. Obviously, Luo Binghe is the one that has the chief crush, right? He is the corporal crusher, if anything, right? But other than that, why? Who has Shen QingQiu wooed over? Well, Ming Fan is one of them. He liked him from the very beginning and always wanted to get on his good side. He obviously liked him. And then he ended up with Ning Ying, or at least over towards her side. So there's that. Liu Qingge, total crush. Tsundere doesn't want to admit it. Crushing. Ying Qingyan, the guy basically was going to unsheath his massive sword that is in no way, shape, or form metaphor for his dick in order to save Shen QingQiu back at the yin-yan whole situation. Whatever. Yep, him too. Gong Yi Zhao literally helped him escape and possibly had a crush on him too. Don't know either. Meng Mo doesn't, but Meng Mo's a ghost, so he ain't even got a dick. He don't even know sexual attraction, none of that. No. Then you have Zhu Xilong. Zhu Xilong for sure. He orchestrated the whole thing with the sewer to try to we'll talk about it, to let Shen QingQiu escape. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And then you have Tianlong Jun, who also has seemingly his crushing is less of a crush and more like he very much has like this coy, again, like Armand from Interview with the Vampire. He just has this kind of like, or I guess it'd be Queen of the Damned, but he has basically this idea of just, I'm gonna toy with you like a cat toying with its mouse and its food until I'm ready to eat you. He has that kind of yandere vibe, sort of like Luo Binghe, but he makes Luo Binghe look like such a puppy dog. He makes Luo Binghe look so innocent and raw in his passion for Shen QingQiu. And Tianlong Jun seems very methodical and very calculating in what he's doing. And he has this air about him that's like, I'm going to get you eventually. It's going to happen. Like, whereas Luo Binghe is like so impulsive and over the top and emotional and erratic, Tianlong Jun's just kind of like, it'll happen. Just you wait and see. And it's like, ah! And like I said last week, I feel like Shen QingQiu in comparison is like, maybe Luo Binghe's not so bad after dealing with all of this. So anyway, Zhu Xilong and Tianlong Jun finally meet Shen QingQiu. And I love that, one, the sun, moon, dew mushroom was used to bring Tianlong Jun back. He was sealed under the mountain. His soul is transmigrated over to the corpse that the mushroom was made after, which begs the question if Tianlong Jun's power is going to be, exponentially risen by the use of the mushroom. Now, the one good thing about all of this that seems to come about is that unlike Shen QingQiu, who is quite compatible with the mushroom, Tianlong Jun does not seem to be. My thing was, Shen QingQiu noted that the mushroom was used in the actual original story. We just don't know exactly when it was used. He just said a villain used it later on. So are we going to go back to that point? I don't know. Maybe not. But in any case, it's not compatible with Tianlong Jun. And I love the idea that his body parts are just slowly falling apart. He's slowly decaying. He was brought back and now he's slowly decaying over time. So like the mushroom body isn't working. So here is our problem. Here is our threat. Because I was like, okay, what is the threat level? If Luo Binghe is not going to kill Shen QingQiu, which I don't think is going to happen now. I think we're slowly melting some ice. We're slowly starting to come around. We're going to talk about it, but I don't think that that's going to be the overall issue anymore. The overall issue seems to be that Tianlong Jun is back. And the other threat is that he wants to use Luo Binghe's body as a host and then destroy the 4 sects. He's like, oh, humanity's fine. I'm all for humanity. I just don't think y'all should be ruled by 4 sects. So let's just dismantle that entire government system and start fresh. And it's like, well, that would maybe work if Shen QingQiu's friends and people he cared about weren't part of those sects you were trying to destroy. So I don't really want to do that, but we'll get more into that and his other goals. But yeah, so I do also really like the idea that Shen QingQiu talks about where he's like, you know, the dad and son are kind of similar, where they both kind of have a thing for the macabre. Luo Binghe likes holding onto corpses, and his dad like lying around coffins. It's just this macabre, demonic thing, right? But they make note that while Luo Binghe has Tianlong Jun's eyes and kind of deep-set features, he does resemble his mother more than anything, right? And I like how Shen QingQiu is like, you know, they both kind of look at me with this weird feeling, gives me the shudders. It's like they both like you, which is crazy. Shen QingQiu has gone from being the scum villain to basically being the protagonist with his own harem of his own. And it's like, oh my God, who could have predicted this? Did airplane shooting toward the sky originally have this in mind? I wonder if airplane shooting towards the sky's original goal was, we talked about last week, was to have Shen QingQiu be gay, but I wondered if it was, he was originally meant to have a starring role and kind of be this character that like came up to be like the actual protagonist of the series. But then everybody reading was like, that's dumb. Why would you want to do that? We have Luo Binghe. He's so cool. And so Shang Qinghua was like, well, I guess I'll just write Luo Binghe to be the protagonist like you want me to, and I'll just abandon giving him all this actual plot, and we'll just make him the scum villain and this big asshole trope. And everybody was like, cool, yes. And he just went with that. But it would make sense for Shen QingQiu to be originally the main character of the story, because the way that he's brought up and the way his character is kind of written in the OG, it seems like it would be right up airplane shooting towards the sky's alley, right? It would kind of be like self-referential maybe even. So I'm going to be curious to see if airplane shooting towards the sky as Shang Qinghua eventually reveals what all that was about. Because he was about to tell Shen QingQiu and then he got interrupted, so he never got a chance to talk to him about it. So anyway, the big thing that's the problem here is that Tianlong Jun is definitely main character material. It's like there's a reason why airplane shooting towards the sky abandoned his plotline, was because he was better than his son. And Shang Qinghua was like, shit, I don't want to keep writing this guy. Then we won't have any point of having Luo Binghe be here. So that brings about a lot of concerns, because that does make him seem like a legitimate threat. Like, if you can't outright kill him and he's stronger than both of you, what do you do? How do you outwit him? So that's going to be the big question in all of this. So yeah. Anyway, I like that Shen QingQiu is terrified at the prospect that Tianlong Jun can just clink his body back together like a dang doll. But as they're talking about it and what's going on, Tianlong Jun makes note that Zhu Xilong is really, really loyal and will do things to an insane extent to get what he wants. He's kind of like a very introverted yandere. I guess in a way, and Tianlong Jun is just kind of like the casual cool yandere. I don't know. But anyway, they talk about, I love that we get the little foreshadowing with the murals. I love that Shen QingQiu looks around at the murals on the wall, realizes where they are. We don't yet know what the Halls of Delight, Fury, and Sorrow mean, but we get established very quickly with them, and then it's almost like a little tease. Like, he's like, okay, something's going to happen with these. We don't know yet. And then the chapter pays off by giving us the 3 halls later on. And I loved the halls. The Hall of Delight, the Hall of Fury, and the Hall of Sorrow. All 3 of those, like, with one being like trapping them inside, with one burning them alive, and with one trying to drown them with acid rain. I love it. I love it's the woman's face. And like the idea, well, here's what they do. So you have the one hall, the Hall of Delight, definitely had that Cave of Wonder feel, where it's like if you took one of the, it's like Abu taking the gemstone and then the Cave of Wonder collapses and it's like, oh no. So the Hall of Delight basically had this woman's face that just got higher and higher, that smile did, and then it emits a scream that gives demons migraines, essentially. So you have that. And then after that, you have the Hall of Fury, which I guess it killed Tianlong Jun. I don't know. We're going to talk about it. But basically it had pillars of lava if you stepped on the face. So we'll talk about that. My dog's been quite annoying, wanting me to throw this ball. He tolerated me reading. Oh, no. Hold on. And then the Hall of Sorrow had acid rain. That basically, they called it corpse rain. But it basically was that. Honestly, I'm gonna be real and have a little moment of Modao Zushi realness with you all. Because, and this is like for the next 30 seconds, kind of a Modao Zushi spoiler. Not directly, but just in general. So if you've not read Modao Zushi, you should just ignore the next 30 seconds. I will be honest, compared to Heaven Official's Blessing and Scum Villain, I never really felt like the injuries that were sustained in Modao Zushi were all that serious. Anytime they talked about like corpse things or like the corpse poison, anytime they talked about the corpse poison in Modao Zushi, I never really felt that nervous about it because it seemed like you just eat some porridge and you're all better. Or the only time I ever felt really nervous was with Zhu Yang. That was like the main thing, and that flashback, that whole thing there was probably like the most tense. I was like, oh no. But the rest of that series was just kind of like, well, will they or won't they, and are they going to solve the problems? So, but I never felt like the corpse poison and stuff like that was a serious threat. End of Modao Zushi spoilers. Here, it feels like a threat. Like, and we'll talk about the corpse rain, but it feels like the poison is a problem, and it feels like the fire and the rain. The characters in this series don't feel as invincible as they do in the other two novel sets. So I think that's really interesting. But anyway, so I love the idea of the Hall of Delight, that her like smile starts to like crack and go higher and higher as she's screaming. That is a terrifying image, and I was living for it. I loved it. I loved all three of the halls. I thought it was so inventive and creative. Definitely creepy and horrific, but it all ties together and I love it. It's great. So then they talk about, as he's looking at the murals, he's like, Zhu Xilong is kind of, hard-headed and inflexible. He keeps entertaining and trying to bring you here to the demon realm. And Shen QingQiu's like, but how does that have to do with repaying a favor? And Tianlong Jun is like, well, none of the 4 major sects are going to be allowed to survive. So if Peak Lord Shim was still there, you would be included with them. So he didn't want you to stay there. So basically, Tianlong Jun's like, I've decided to destroy everyone and kill all of the 4 sects. And Zhu Xilong realized that you saved him, so he wanted to repay the favor. So he was going to get you out of there so that you weren't destroyed along with everyone else. Isn't that great? I was like, oh no! And he's like, no, wait a minute. He's like, so you're going to exterminate the human race? He's like, well, no. He's like, I like humans. I just don't like the 4 major sects. So he says, on the contrary, I have a gift for the human realm. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. I'm a little concerned about that. I'm like, what do you mean a gift for the human realm? What does that entail? I don't know. He has some kind of gift. I'm like, is the gift your penis? I don't know. Is he going to be like, is his gift, is he going to become like the protagonist in the Stallion novel? And he's like, my gift is to have sex with everyone. I'm trying to destroy the 4 sects. I'm like, what is this gift? At this point, it would be quite important to go find airplane shooting towards the sky and be like, what the fudge? What gift are we talking about? The problem is that I don't think airplane shooting towards the sky remembers or knows or cares because they're a moron. I don't think that they know. So I don't know what good it's going to do for them to go find him and ask. I don't even know. So Shen QingQiu doesn't know what this gift is. He's like, I don't think it's going to make people happy, so I don't know what this means. Unless he's going to turn them on the demons. We don't know. We have no clue what this gift is. So is it sexual? Is it devious? Is it all the above? We don't know. But that's when that's when Luo Binghe shows up with the actual moon rhinoceros, the black moon rhinoceros pythons. I love it. I love it. So, in this case, Tian Longjun notes that for 5 years, my nephew's been putting his all into helping you make a clean break from the sect. He's like, are you going to go with him? And he's like, wait a minute, what? So he basically said he got the sower in there to single him out and to try to get it to where he could escape and get away from the mountain sect before Tian Longjun destroyed him. And it's like, oh no. Now, the one thing that is interesting is that they say that he did not bring Chu Haiteng into this. Tian Longjun doesn't know who it is. I like how indifferent he is. He's like, I don't know that name. I was like, what? And then Zhu Xilong's like, this humble one did not bring that woman. I don't know. Who be she? So, my thing is, in the OG story, Shen QingQiu said that the woman, the Haiteng woman, she was the one that kind of revealed all of this to begin with in the OG version that kind of stopped his reputation. So it could very well be that it just reached that point in the story and she showed up. I don't know though. I'm like, the only other person who would really know that she was relevant in that regard would be Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky, who just happened to be there when all this went down as well. So I don't know. I don't know if that means that Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky can't be trusted, if he's being shady. I don't know if it's just pure coincidence. I don't know if the system was just making the plot points happen like they were supposed to. We don't know, honestly. So it's kind of up in the air at this point, right? So Shen QingQiu's like, okay, so you introduced the sowers. You tried to get it to where I would leave the Peak and the Peak Lords to come hang out with you. Okay. You weren't responsible for Haiteng. That was something else entirely. Okay. And so they're also like, thanks for taking care of that son of mine. This was the other thing that reminded me of Modao Zushi, and only in the sense of it made me think of the character Yao in Modao Zushi, where Yao's not really recognized by his father, and neither is Luo Binghe. That was like the first part I felt kind of bad for Luo Binghe, because it's like usually in a story like this, the dad is all like, that son of mine, I've got to get rid of that son, or I've got to get him to take over for me, or the dad has, even if it's for nefarious or evil means, he has an investment in the son to use him or whatnot. Here, Tian Longjun doesn't even care. He doesn't even acknowledge Luo Binghe. He's just like, oh yeah, thanks for taking care of him. Cool. Like, just the definition of a deadbeat dad that just has no interest in him at all. And I was like, oh, I felt kind of bad. I was like, Zhu Xilong, and the fact that Luo Binghe fought against Tian Longjun and Zhu Xilong had that entire battle, and then Shen QingQiu finds out as they're leaving that he doesn't realize the two of them are his only living relatives. What? Insane. Insane. And I felt really bad for him for that. I was like, his ass got kicked by his own father, and he doesn't even know it was his dad. His dad didn't even give him the courtesy to tell him that. And he doesn't know that Zhu Xilong's his uncle, or his cousin, rather. Huh. So that sucks. That sucks for him. And then Tian Longjun says, well, how should I start? I discovered that for you, the feeling you nurse, the feelings he nurses are quite... Shen QingQiu's like, I don't need to know. I don't need to know anymore. I don't need to hear the rest of this story. And that's when Luo Binghe shows up. Because Shen QingQiu's like, well, he's still your son. He's like, yeah, your son by Su Jian. He's like, so? What I liked about this part of the story here is that Shen QingQiu thought, like I said, that when Tian Longjun, he thought that Tian Longjun would be somebody easy to rile up, be like, well, but he's your son with that human, and there's all this like fan fiction and backstory I've created about you and your son's relationship, and it's all going to come to fruition. There's going to be this big battle, and you guys are going to fight over, ruling the world and whatever. No. Tian Longjun is not a pacifist. He's not apathetic. He is apathetic. He just has this apathetic detachment. He's like, Shen QingQiu had imagined him as deeply passionate and pacifistic, and that's not the case at all. He's detached, apathetic, and doesn't really care. And I'm like, oh. So Shen QingQiu's kind of just blown away by this realization that Luo Binghe was not even loved by his own parents. And it's like, shit. So obviously Shen QingQiu's going to feel bad for him. Because he's like, wow, your family doesn't even like you. That sucks. I feel bad for you. You should be loved. Everyone deserves that. Oh no. And he's really, really dissatisfied with Tianlongjun. And that's when he starts to think about what he had said to Luo Binghe. So at this point, Shen QingQiu is suddenly realizing it took meeting the dad and realizing how deadbeat the dad was to realize, oh, maybe I've been a little bit bad to Luo Binghe in all of this. Now, I still maintain Luo Binghe acted rashly and immaturely. I still maintain that. I think that there were better ways to go about it. I get why he did it. I don't think he should be excused for his actions. And I don't think Shen QingQiu is excusing him. But what I think Shen QingQiu is doing is realizing that he did not treat Luo Binghe like an actual person. He was treating him like a character, and seeing the way that his dad treats him was kind of like, oh shit, yeah, I wasn't any better. He's like, I kind of have been, especially last week, he's like, back, I was really coarse to him last time, and then left him all alone with my corpse, and then I find out that he's been spending the last 5 years trying to repair my meridians and keep my body afloat, and didn't give up on me, and has been wanting to be with me, and I've kind of treated him like shit. It's like, oof. Yep. And so about that time, Luo Binghe shows up for chapter 58 with the black moon rhinoceros python, which is really cool to actually see it in the flesh, right? Because back during the Alliance conference, I was like, oh, dang, that monster sounded really cool. That'd have been really neat to see. Darn, we're not going to get to see it. And now we do. It's like, yeah, nice. So things are all somehow in the story finding their way to skirt back around and kind of tie back into the story, which is interesting. It's almost like, again, the system tries to course correct, and if you leave an element out, it needs to show back up at some point to like keep the order of the system. Maybe. Possibly. So anyway, Tianlongjun is like, you captured 200 black moon rhinoceros pythons to break the barrier. And then this whole moment where Luo Binghe shows up, of course, to get Shen QingQiu because he loves him. But here's the thing. This is kind of a twofold moment, right? This is kind of a twofold moment. One, Shen QingQiu is somewhat aware now that he hid behind Zhu Xilong, and he's like, oh shit, that makes me look like I'm ignoring him again. I don't want to do that. Quit doing things that are sending the wrong message, right? So he's trying to course correct. So Shen QingQiu is trying to course correct and not mislead Luo Binghe. And the other thing that is important is that Luo Binghe is somewhat controlling himself, and he's not immediately getting handsy or immediately like being like aggressive with Shen QingQiu. He's actually taking a step back, and he's there to save him, but he's not just going to get up in Shen QingQiu's space where it's not appropriate. And I was like, and I feel like it took Shen QingQiu dying in his arms a second time for him to realize that maybe he needs to take it a little slower. Maybe. And kind of get down to Shen QingQiu's level and figure out why Shen QingQiu is being the way that he is being. Maybe. It was definitely an improvement. I was like, okay, we're not just grabbing him and making out with him. You both are feeling each other out. I know how that sounded. just yeah, it's an improvement, right? But here's the thing too. Luo Binghe gets wrecked by the dad, Tianlongjun. Obviously he doesn't die, but he's not doing great. Let's take a moment to point out with Luo Binghe all of our problems. So Luo Binghe not only has broken bones, he has multiple concussions, Like, some of those times where they talked about him, his head hitting the ground and hitting the slab, like, hard, I was like, ooh. I was like, is his head bleeding? Oh, no. Now, the multiple concussions, is it going to literally knock some sense into Luo Binghe? I feel like in this moment, and it's probably not the best comparison, and sorry if you're a Luo Binghe stan, but it felt like, you know, when your TV's not working or the DVD player's not working, you just smack it a couple times. You just smack it and then it just like the fog clears up. It's like static. If your TV's staticky, the antenna's not working, you just smack it real hard and suddenly it clears up. That's what I was thinking of with Luo Binghe. That's it. You just smacked him. He got smacked against the wall. The static clears. We'll talk about the fog of misunderstanding, but the static clears and it's like, oh, boop, here we go. So maybe it's good for him. Maybe it's helpful. But the problem is he's been spitting blood. His chest, his neck, and like his everything's just covered in blood all throughout this. And then he also has like rotting flesh on his back from the rain, from the corpse rain where he was protecting Shen QingQiu. He has his flesh on his back is rotting. We need to fix that. And then his hand circulation is bad, but his head is burning up, which is probably because the two systems in his body, the two systems are not in unison anymore. It's probably him getting jostled around and getting knocked up the head is like getting all of his body out of whack, right? And the whole time this is going on, Jin Mo, this sword that's trying to take control of him and use his essence to feed itself, is trying to kill him. Luo Binghe is not having a great day at all. My thing is, my next step was that Shen QingQiu needs to realize he has to save Luo Binghe. He may not have to realize it. He may be forced to save Luo Binghe. He may not even have to do a realization. He may be like, oh, no, I gotta save him because he might die. The question is this going to be like a reversal where Shen QingQiu has to get sexual with Luo Binghe to cure him? To cure him? Instead of it being vice versa like we thought at the beginning? I don't know. It could be, which is insane to me. So I don't know what we're going to do with that, but it's so fascinating. Another thing that's a possibility is that Shen QingQiu talks about the plot armor. He's like, he's the protagonist. Luo Binghe should be impervious to all this. Why is this happening to him? I think it's because of one of two reasons. Either one, Tian Longjun was a force that the original novel had not taken into account, that is an entirely like foreign entity, and now that it's been introduced into the story, it's something that Luo Binghe does not have plot armor to because it wasn't part of the OG story. So he has no plot armor to it. It's like an alternate entity that's just shown up. He has no way to counter it. It's like a foreign object in a body that the white blood cells can't fend off. So it could be that reason. And then two, now as the story has gone on, the story has kind of shifted to where Shen QingQiu is sort of the protagonist, and Luo Binghe is no longer the Stallion novel protagonist. And since Luo Binghe is no longer the Stallion novel protagonist, he doesn't have the same protection that he did before. So it could be either one of those. It could be a combination. But I think Shen QingQiu is going to need to realize that Luo Binghe is not impervious anymore. He's not infallible, especially while his dad is there. That's the big thing. So we'll see where that goes. Whenever Luo Binghe said, come with me, I was like, we're going right back to that scene in Jinlan City where he was like, come with me. And Shen QingQiu wouldn't do it. And now Shen QingQiu's like, okay, let's go. So I do want to go back up one little bit because he mentioned something at the scene. What does he do when he shows up? It's like Luo Binghe comes here. What does he say here? I'm like, what? They talk about him breaking in. Sorry, I want to come back to this. Where he's like, as long as he wants to enter, he definitely can. Okay, and he's like, because he's your son. And so Luo Binghe shows up with the black moon rhinoceroses. And then he says, only this son of mine truly goes to extraordinary lengths for you. So I guess Luo Binghe didn't hear that. He's like, You shouldn't have brought those 2 strays. So, the 2 strays, there are 2 demons involved in, I'm assuming they're demons because they talk about there being demons to get in. So, is 6 balls one of them? Is 6 balls one of the demons that helped him get into the Holy Mausoleum? So, the 2 demons that helped him get in, who are they? I feel like they're going to be key to them getting out. I feel like the 2 demons that helped Luo Binghe get in are going to be essential to Luo Binghe getting out, because MXTX is being quite mysterious as to who they are, right? Interesting. But yeah, so Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe, they try to help each other. Shen QingQiu tries to get him out of there. And then, of course, what ends up happening is that Zhu Xilong substitutes himself instead. Zhu Xilong is incredibly effective at being a problem. So it's like, why? I just like, oh no, I don't know what Zhu Xilong is going to end up doing in the story, but he is just a very effective, just little barrier that's there during all of this. I love that moment where Tianlong Jun, he's like, he looks like his mother. And then I love that Shen QingQiu just couldn't resist being like, well, his eyes look like yours. And he's like, I'm going to kill your subordinate. And then that doesn't work because Zhu Xilong would just rather kill himself instead. And it causes them to destroy the Hall of Delight. And Shen QingQiu tries to like take off with Luo Binghe. It's an amazing scene. I love that entire moment with the laughing. I could just visualize it. Like, I don't know if the Donghua, if it stays in that CGI format, I don't know if it could do that scene justice. I was thinking about that as I was reading, because here's my thing. When I'm imagining all of this going down, and this is the weirdest way to describe it, but I'm not imagining it in 3D, like the CGI. When I'm reading this, I'm imagining this animated like the 2D Donghua that Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing is. That's just how I envision it. I can't envision, especially now that I've seen the illustrations that don't look exactly like the CGI, I just imagine this in 2D. So if you were to like create this in a 2D format like Heaven Official's Blessing, I think the smiling face and like all that could be really cool. I don't know how it would work with CGI. I don't think it would be as necessarily effective. So, but you all can comment down below what you think about that, as my dog demands my attention for yet another 30 minutes. So yeah, so they go to the next mausoleum, which is the Hall of Fury. And Shen QingQiu realizes he grabbed the wrong person. And as all of this goes down, we find out Shen QingQiu originally grabbed Luo Binghe and went to the Hall of Fury because he knew in the original version, in the OG version, Luo Binghe had gone to the Hall of Fury and had danced around. Now, I don't know exactly why Luo Binghe in the OG version went to the mausoleum, what the point was if he wasn't trying to bring Shen QingQiu back. He doesn't, again, this is a point of unreliable narration because Shen QingQiu doesn't exactly explain in the OG version why they were in the Holy Mausoleum. He said when he eluded the Holy Mausoleum, like, that's all he really says, he cleared this level by using a special sequence of steps to cross it. He doesn't exactly say what Luo Binghe looted the mausoleum for, unless he's already mentioned that, but he doesn't exactly say what he looted it for. So again, unreliable narration. Shen QingQiu's leaving out parts of the story he's not even explained to us, the audience, yet. So it's like, wait a minute, what? But that's why he grabbed Luo Binghe, because he's like, oh, well, he'll remember the steps, and he's OP, so we'll get out of here, and it will be fine. But yeah, so apparently they've stepped on it too much. The ground's getting hotter and hotter like a hot plate. Jushi turns back into a snake. The funny thing is, Jushi turns back into a snake to protect Shen QingQiu, and Shen QingQiu's like, didn't I just try to kill this guy? like Zhu Xilong he's the Wen Ning of Scum villain, which is fine. I like Wen Ning and Modao Zushi, so I'm perfectly fine with this. But here's the thing. Tianlong Jun comes down and he's like, am I mistaken, or does Peak Lord Shen seem more familiar with this Holy Mausoleum than even me? And it's like, well, yeah, he's read the original story, but Zhu Xilong says don't come in. And before questioning could appear on his face, he had taken 6 or 7 steps across the woman's face. And then a pillar of magma exploded upward, and Tianlong Jun. It felt like a comedy take. Like, it felt like something from Tropic Thunder, or like, it was like, do, 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 do. And we're like, what? So, So that's it. As far as we know, maybe none of this will be a problem. Maybe none of this will be a threat. Did they just kill Zhang Longjun? Tian Longjun, did they just kill him? I don't feel like he's dead because I feel like I'm like it couldn't be that easy. Right? We are in volume 3, but we're only at the start of volume 3 and we still got like another volume to go after this. I'm like, we couldn't just kill him that easily. And so I love that Shen QingQiu's just laughing. He's like, oh my God, this is great. And so Luo Binghe staggers forward and he's in this terrible state. And Shen QingQiu's like, damn, you look even worse than you did when I first came to this story and you were beaten up by me. He's like, what is this? He's like, why is everybody using violence against you? This isn't Baisan Peak. So Zhu Xilong is circling the pillar of fire, too occupied for anything else. So that tells me that even though it seems like maybe Tian Longjun just kicked the bucket, I don't think so. I think that Zhu Xilong is going to get him out of that pillar of fire. He'll probably be burnt to a crisp, like Darth Vader style, but I think he's going to get him out of there and he's going to live in some way, shape, or form. But that allows for Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe to escape. So Luo Binghe explains if you step on the acupoints, that's how you get out across the face. So then they go to the demoness of the Hall of Sorrow, and she's perched in the hall, and the woman's face, like once the eyes open, its face looks more miserable and drops of water seep from its eyes and a dense rain drizzled down from the ceiling. So Shen QingQiu's about to speak up and warn Luo Binghe this is corpse rain, and that's when Luo Binghe raises his arm to cover Shen QingQiu and runs straight across. And just like that, it's done. I love how Shen QingQiu's like, that took up 10 chapters in the original story. And the system's like, you cut down the plot. So 100 points. 100 points. So we get 100 more B points. So now we're at 1430. Yay. Got them 100 points. Don't you worry. And we cut down the plot. So hooray. Yay, rah. But I love that. I love the humor that MXTX is like, see, we're cutting down the story. We cut down all those chapters with Ning Ying Ying, so now we're cutting down these as well. But I'm guessing that when Luo Binghe was fighting Tian Longjun, that the acid, he had like tears or something in his robe, so the rain got down in that, and that's what's causing his skin to be like seared by the acid. So yeah, and the only thing that they talk about is Luo Binghe asks if all the meridians are working well, and he's like, yep, that seems good. And then he's like, well, good, I preserved the other body for a few days, but it still withered in the end. It doesn't bode well if anything goes wrong with this one. Which is very much foreshadowing for us, the audience, that Luo Binghe is aware this is the last time. This is the last shot you got. The other body's gone. You're back in the original. Glad the meridians are working well. Sat there with your corpse for 5 years to make sure we got him bit by bit back to the beginning. But this is it. And I feel like maybe that's why Luo Binghe is a bit more cautious and taking his time now, because he's like, I've screwed up twice. If I screw up a third time, it's over. I don't get a third chance. I get this third chance. I don't get a fourth. So in any case, Luo Binghe says that he came alone. Those two aren't good companions. He's like, if Shizun doesn't want to stay with me, I hope he wouldn't associate with them. And so I like that Shen QingQiu doesn't really question him at this point of who those other two are, but instead asks if he ever met Tian Longjun or Zhu Xilong. And so Luo Binghe says that he's met Zhu Xilong, but he hasn't really met up with Tian Longjun before, which is sad. So about this time, Luo Binghe is just, he's had enough. I wish the book would have given us what I was expecting there to be a drawing of, was that when we got to the scene where he just kind of collapses and Shen QingQiu like hoists him up and they're like walking down the hallway together. I was expecting that in this book. I was expecting the illustration. The illustration of Tian Longjun and of them in the coffin is really nice. I'm not complaining about that, but I honestly thought whenever I was reading this part here, I'm like, oh, I bet the picture for this week is going to be him like holding them up as they walk through. Nope. That's not what we got, but it would be a really nice image, right? So yeah, we don't get to see the image of them hoisting each other up and holding them up, but we get to find out that when Shen reaches further, he's like, the clothes on his back had become ragged and corroded. The texture of the skin underneath was all wrong, as if it was rotting, and it was beginning to smell. After all, there was nothing good about corpse rain. And we don't have a way of bringing Luo Binghe back, so what they're going to do, I don't know. And the problem is, like, Shen QingQiu's going to have to find a way to heal him, but nobody from the sects are going to want to heal him because they're all going to hate Luo Binghe, and they're going to believe, if Shen QingQiu asks them to, that he's being forced to ask him by Luo Binghe. So it's gonna get complicated. As if it wasn't already. But yeah, you can't just go ask Liu Qinghe to help him. Liu Qinghe is going to be like, I'm not helping that bastard. And it's like, I think that Liu Qinghe would help Luo Binghe if Shen QingQiu asked. I think that'd be the only reason and the only way it would happen. But it sucks. So anyway, that's when he's like, this is more serious than a fever. This is, I'm wondering if Shen QingQiu is going to have to help Luo Binghe get his wits back about him and do something to help right the wrongs. So anyway, they go inside this coffin, which, if you've read Heaven Official's Blessing, does this rival that coffin scene? I don't know. I think I prefer the coffin scene in Heaven Official's Blessing, but the context for that scene, here's my thing. I feel, and this is some Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers, for the next minute, 30 seconds to a minute. I'll wave my hand when I'm done talking about Heaven Official's Blessing. But here's the thing. I like the setup and the execution of this coffin scene because of like the creepy like corpses trying to get in. Like, that part was genuinely scary. And I like that it slowly has Shen get more and more vulnerable and get himself to where he has Luo Binghe's body more and more on him, and he's like getting into position, basically. I liked that setup. The only thing is, what I like about Heaven Official's Blessing a little bit more is that both parties are awake and interacting with one another, and there's this awkwardness where they're in close proximity, and Shilian is realizing in that moment that he's kind of getting maybe turned on and being like, oh no, what do I do about this? And they're both present and looking at each other and understanding. Granted, end of Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers, if Luo Binghe had been conscious during all of this, they would be dead because he would have like imploded, like just would have spontaneously combusted. So yeah, I get why they didn't have him conscious throughout this part of it. But yeah, it's a really good scene. The idea of as the creature's trying to get into the coffin, that was so terrifying. And then Shen QingQiu keeps trying to like get it to where like it just gets Luo Binghe closer and closer to him. And then he kisses the mark on his forehead and like puts his mouth over it. Just MXTX, you fiend. You fiend. And the thing about it is that Shen QingQiu is not uncomfortable during all of this. He complains about it, right? But that's Shen QingQiu. He's a peacock. But he's not uncomfortable and talking about how this is the worst thing ever. He says it's entirely too improper. Sure. But he doesn't ever say he has a big problem with it. And at that point, I'm like, okay. I'm like, Shen QingQiu may not want to admit it at this point, but he was okay with that whole scenario. And it's almost, it felt like, again, this section's called Melting the Ice. It felt like this was the first moment where Shen QingQiu kind of gets to test the waters of being like, oh, I'm in this compromising position with this man that likes me. Am I okay with this? And he's not the whole time being like, this is gross. I hate this. I want to get away from here. No, he's just like, oh, this is kind of improper. This feels scandalous. But at no point was he like, oh, this is disgusting. I hate it. So we just gotta hope. We just gotta hope that Liu Qinghe or somebody doesn't walk into the room with the coffins and go, and just like leave, right? We gotta hope that doesn't happen. So then Meng Mo shows back up. Meng Mo is here. Hi, Meng Mo. It's been a while. Oh my God. So he shows back up. And I love that he's basically just bitching the whole time, that now he gets a chance to bitch because Luo Binghe's passed out. And again, he is this moment. Ning Ying Ying was the moment of exposition for Luo Binghe back last volume. She was like, hey, Luo Binghe, here's what's been going down while you've been pissed off at Shen QingQiu. Maybe you shouldn't be so pissed off at him because even though he's not the best at communicating, he has been concerned about you, blah, blah, blah. In this volume, right at the beginning, instead of at the end, we have Meng Mo being like, hey, this bitch is so into you, he won't call me master. And he's so into you that he's wasting his time and blah, blah, blah. He was giving us all the exposition we needed and enough to let Shen QingQiu kind of understand what's been going on. Because Shen QingQiu, for all he knew, thought Meng Mo was teaching him all these things and he was learning all these evil ways. And Meng Mo comes out in this chapter and literally says, no, that's not really what's going on. And it hasn't been going on this entire time. And so again, Shen QingQiu feels kind of bad because he's like, I was kind of wrong about him. He isn't like the OG version. I am mistaken. It's like, yes! So now Luo Binghe knows, Shen QingQiu knows. I am hoping that this volume, where they're hand in hand, is them coming to terms with one another and building that relationship back, because you had two chances. You both blew it on each account. Luo Binghe blew it on one account. You blew it on another. So now you both have each had a chance to make this work. Here's your last chance. Fancy, don't let me, here's your one chance, Fancy, don't let me down. You know, that's where we're at. So anyway, Meng Mo bitches for a long time about all of this. And I love that Shen QingQiu, Meng Mo's basically going on about how Luo Binghe loves him and everything, and he doesn't understand why. And the only thing Shen QingQiu's getting out of it is like, superficial sword techniques. I did a great job teaching him. And I'm like, ah! So yeah. So he's like, are you done? Can you let me wake up? And he's like, the entrance is already closed. And he's like, well, I'm going to go back and use that and maybe use the Black Moon Rhinoceros Pythons. And Meng Mo's like, that's not going to work. So then Shen QingQiu talks about he wants to use Jin Mo to escape. That seems like a very bad idea. That seems like an awful idea. That seems like a no good, very bad, you only have one life to live, Shen QingQiu. That seems like a bad idea. Now here's the problem and the interesting thing of it. Meng Mo doesn't say it's impossible. He doesn't say, oh, you'll die if you do that. No. He says the sword may not allow you to use it. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, I have to try. So that means there's a very good chance it will let him use it. Now, will it try to kill him if he does? And Luo Binghe has to be like, no. Or what if it does let him use it? What if Jin Mo is like, what if Jin Mo's into him too? So it's like, what if the sword's into him too? Far be it from MXTX to give swords sentience and feel sexual things. Far be from it. So, I don't know. On my Scum Villain Self-Saving System bingo card, at no point was Shen QingQiu using Jin Mo on said card. That was like something that I thought would never happen. So, what? So I'm going to be very curious to see if he manages to use Jin Mo or if Luo Binghe is going to stop him before he gets to that point. And it's like, nah, we'll get this. We don't have to use him for that. I'm going to be very, very curious to see if that's the case. But anyway, so Shen QingQiu was about to sit up when his right leg brushed against something stiff that jabbed the inside of his thigh that he only noticed just now. So Shen QingQiu was like, oh, is that a sword hilt? And he reached down to move it. But then he touched it. And the system went wild. The system was like, oh, you finally got to this point. The funny thing is the system doesn't seem to care whether the actions themselves were on accident or intentional. It just treats it as if you've done the thing. So that's all that you had to do. So as far as satisfaction points go, we were at 1340, but let me tell you, we have now pushed up to 2,340 because we unlocked the physical relationship advancement. And I like that the little emoji that is supposed to be the cute sign there looks kind of like a monster. Fits. And so Shen QingQiu's like, oh no. And that's when he realizes the sword hilt is the heavenly pillar. And I love Shen QingQiu saying, I'm going to kill everyone in this room, which is no one, and himself. I love that after flailing about for a while, where he's like, after flailing about for a while, he slaps himself in the face. And then he's like, look, you couldn't tell day from night in the Holy Mausoleum. You can't tell. It also could be morning. So me touching him and him, like his penis being erect is part of morning wood. It is a natural occurrence. It is totally normal. It is in no way, shape related to, and I'm like, Shen QingQiu, you are fooling yourself if you think at this point it has no clue or no coincidence with him liking you. You know he likes you. You know that. There is no denying these claims at this point. So I'm like, Shen QingQiu, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yep. But he's like, it would go away on its own, right? That's usually how it would go, right? He's like, I couldn't just sit here and do nothing about it, right? And then he's like, he couldn't exactly help Luo Binghe jerk off under these circumstances, right? He's like, well, could he pretend to just not to see it? I'm like, Shen QingQiu, if you help him in any way, give him a hand job, it's over. It's over. I have no sympathy for you at that point, so. Oh my God. I felt like this discussion was a mess. I've just been not only trying to like throw my dog this stupid toy the entire time, so I'm sorry. He has demanded my attention. He's like Luo Binghe. But also there was so much happening in this discussion. So we're going to see what the chapter titles are, but I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. With this chapter set, please no spoilers, but let's see what the chapter titles were for this lovely set of chapters that we've managed to attain. So let's see what we get here. So the chapter titles for this lovely set of chapters. Let me go find them up here. Reiki's got these all saved for me. So chapter 57 was called the Holy Mausoleum. Seems legit. Chapter 58, Hall of Delight, Hall of Fury, Hall of Sorrow. All right. And chapter 59, I'm terrified to click this one. The ice disappears. The snow melts. Yep, and so it's like, okay, all right, here we are. We made it. This was a really good chapter set. And it gets hard each week because I know I'm reading ahead, but I do wait for like the next set of comments because I don't want to read too far ahead and then have like so many comments to come back to. But I'm like, it's going to be really hard to not read ahead, let me tell you. I'm glad I have a lot of shows on this channel to keep up with. Otherwise, I'd already be done with this novel. With this entire series. But, okay. All right. We're going to see what happens next, aren't we? So, in any case, I'm super excited to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you all enjoyed this erratic discussion and reaction. But, again, every week, I have no clue where the story is going. And that's the best part. So, in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Scum Villain's self-saving system.